Episode 601, Divorce Paperwork in the Mail. Ashley talked a lot, but Clarissa didn't speak at all along the way. Finally, Ashley stopped talking. After driving on the road for an hour and a half, the car stopped in front of the Fay family's gates. Despite becoming more low-key in the Evanston circle after the low-tide period last time, the Fay family's wealthy background remained. Only then did Ashley take a look at Clarissa's figure. She had grown up together with her, but at this time, she felt like Clarissa was a little different now. Clarissa, I read the news about Louis. When Clarissa got out of the car, she closed the door and slung her camera over her shoulders. Turning to smile at Ashley, she waved her hands generously and charmingly. It's quite a good thing. Thank you for the ride. It's not a convenient time today, but I'll invite you for dinner another day. She directly went into the Fay family's house. Behind, Ashley stared at Clarissa's back with worry. After a long while, she sighed again, not knowing why her brother had compromised in the first place. At the Fay family, when Clarissa walked up to the gate, the maid looked directly at her and frowned. She glanced at her up and down, noticing that there was even a tiny loose thread on her floral skirt. "Can I help you?" she asked. Clarissa glanced at her and said, "I'm looking for Mrs. Fay." The maid looked rather sweet, but she walked back in disbelief when she heard this. As she turned around, the Fay family's butler, Charles, came up to them. "Ma'am," Charles smiled at her, "you're finally back. Mrs. Fay has been waiting for you a long time and is currently making soup in the kitchen." He turned his head in the direction of the kitchen and picked up Clarissa's camera. "Ma'am, Clarissa is back." Glancing at the situation inside the kitchen, Clarissa knew that she might not be able to leave tonight. She handed her camera to Charles and said, "I'll go inside and take a look." "Yes." The butler hurried upstairs while carrying her camera. Before leaving, he gave the maid a light, chastising look. The maid froze, and a cold sweat broke on her back. Hadn't it already been rumored that she wasn't favored by the Fay family? What was going on? "Clarissa, why haven't you been back in so long? Do you not want Mrs. Fay anymore?" Mrs. Fay came out of the kitchen and wiped her hands with a piece of paper. She looked at Clarissa and couldn't help but mutter, "Did Louis make you angry again today? That bastard! I've already told him to come back." At the mention of Louis, his mother, Gloria, crossed her arms with a flushed face. "No, those things on the internet are just groundless accusations. Don't be too bothered by them." Clarissa shook her head, feeling her head throb as well. "Your heart is weak. It's not good to be angry." Gloria was about to say something else, but Clarissa smiled and said, "I'll go up to take a shower first." There was an exclusive room for her upstairs, separated from Louis. She opened the door, and the butler carefully placed her camera on the table. Taking out a USB, she sat down and inserted it into her computer. There were computers in her room, a laptop and a desktop computer, both of which were full sets from Bessy. She turned on the computer and, instead of immediately clicking on the content and pictures inside the USB, she clicked on the history record and directly logged into a black and white website. If anyone was here, they would definitely be able to tell that this was 129's official website. She took a can of beer for herself and opened the tab with one hand while reading the news. Many people looked for her to take orders, and she took 2 or 3 orders every month, more so than Bessy. What she was looking for today were the 3 single missions in Austria. She was halfway through when the door suddenly opened. Frowning, she directly exited the website page. She kicked her chair and turned around to see who it was. By the door stood Louis, wearing a black suit and looking at her with a dark, impatient expression. "You asked my mom to call me back again?
Clarissa, have you forgotten the third clause of our agreement? We shall not interfere with each other? Or is this your new trick?
Louis's face was red with anger. His marriage with Clarissa had been a complete fake arrangement. He was all about Sherry, but his mother didn't like her. However, he was stubborn and knew that Sherry belonged to him. He had only agreed to the marriage with Clarissa because she didn't want her family to urge her to marry either. Both families knew each other and had the intention of them getting married. They had hit it off. At first, he felt like this girl was pretty good and peaceful. But later, she had become a demon and went to file complaints to his mother every 2 or 3 days. If it weren't for the information given to him by Sherry, he wouldn't have known that the loyal and honest Clarissa on the surface was actually such a demon. And Clarissa didn't know why Gloria was so trusting of her. But every complaint worked. Hence, Louis became even more impatient with her, but he still didn't dare to anger his mother and did whatever she asked. Halfway through his meeting today, Gloria had threatened and lured him to come back and apologize to Clarissa. And it was all because of that news. Louis's voice was rather loud and crackling. Clarissa drank the last sip of beer and squeezed the beer can before throwing it into the trash can. She thought to herself that if she were Bessy, she would have already beaten Louis out of impatience. She didn't know how Lone Wolf's temper had developed, but she had guessed that it had never been much better. "You're not worth it." Clarissa glared lightly at him. "I'll send you the divorce paperwork later." Upon hearing the word divorce, Louis's mood improved a lot, and he took a deep look at her. "I hope so." He turned around and went straight downstairs. In the room, Clarissa stared at his back as he left. They had agreed to get a divorce twice, but both times it had been scared off by Gloria's sudden heart attack. Gloria treated her very well, and she was indeed afraid of her condition. Thinking of this, she took out her phone and sent a text message to Bessy. "How was your heart surgery department?" On the other end, Bessy had already gotten off the plane and had arrived at Pete's hospital. She wasn't quite sure about what she meant, so she asked Patrick instead. "How's your boss's heart surgery?" Patrick also received the news that Pete had turned the crisis into peace. He smiled and said, "If he claims to be the second best, nobody would dare to take first place." Nodding, Bessy put her hat on her head and slowly sent his original words to Clarissa. Only then did she continue moving forward. Having received this good news, Clarissa smiled and sent another message. "Okay, I'll send you the case later." Then she directly went downstairs. At the dining table, Gloria gave Clarissa a bowl of soup. "Clarissa, are you going on a business trip again? What's a girl working so hard for? Your boss shouldn't have let you be a war reporter from the beginning, and even let you go on business trips so often." "Mom, I'm okay." Clarissa smiled and gave her a piece of vegetable. Gloria's heart was weak and she couldn't eat greasy food. "I heard from the butler that you've been in poor health recently. I'll accompany you to a checkup 2 days later." "Oh, if it weren't for some terrible sun, I would be in very good health." Gloria sneered at Louis and then gave Clarissa a piece of meat. "Clarissa, eat more." After watching her finish the meat, Gloria looked indifferently at Louis. "Do you have an auction tomorrow night? Take Clarissa along." Louis frowned and glanced at Clarissa. In the past, Clarissa always rejected, with the excuse of working overtime. Unexpectedly, she remained silent and just lowered her head to drink the soup. His eyes became obscure, and he couldn't guess what she was thinking. "Okay, Mom." As soon as he finished speaking, Clarissa raised her head slowly. "Mom, I have a press conference tomorrow. I don't have time." Gloria immediately spoke gently.
Okay, you attend to your affairs then. Don't tire yourself out.
After dinner, Clarissa said she had to do overtime work and went upstairs. Gloria wiped her mouth with a handkerchief and looked coldly at Louis.
Follow me upstairs.
Upstairs in Gloria's room. Bam! She threw a newspaper on the table and stared sternly at Louis.
What happened?
The newspaper showed his headline with Olivia's song.
Mom, she's just a girl at school. She used to study criminal investigation, and she just entered the entertainment industry. We just happened to meet in a hotel.
Louis pressed his temple, his head aching.
Did Clarissa? No, she didn't tell me anything. Louis, you're a man. You should remain clean after you get married. Not have these unspeakable scandals.
Gloria naturally knew her son and trusted his character enough to know that the reports weren't real. She just scolded him and said angrily,
What's wrong with Clarissa? She was admitted to one of the best photography schools and even studied abroad. Her character is good, and she's also good-looking. What's so good about that Sherry? She has already disappeared, but you're still so hung up on her? Okay, Mom, don't be angry.
Louis immediately succumbed to Gloria and didn't speak further about Sherry. However, he was surprised that Clarissa had also studied abroad. It didn't bother him for long, though. After a while, he left to handle business in the company. Half an hour later at the bar, several young men in Evanston were drinking together.
Have you heard that the head of the Wright family is back? He returned as an elite and is young and promising. Many people in Evanston have their eyes on him. My old dad still used him as an example to scold me for being useless. Ugh, Louis, it's a deeply ingrained resentment.
A gentleman with glasses looked at Louis and couldn't help but laugh.
Is it because of the family status again?
These were all Louis's childhood friends, and their relationship with each other was very good.
It must be his wife. By the way, what's your wife's name? Forget it.
The man with a buzz cut shook his wine cup indifferently.
I don't know what's wrong with your mom. She found a girl whose figure, looks, talent, and even family background aren't as good as...
Before he finished speaking, the man with a buzz cut was nudged by the people around him. He quickly quieted down and didn't dare to mention Louis's sore spot. Louis and Clarissa had been married for so many years, but he had never once brought her to meet his buddies. From this point, his attitude towards her was obvious. Louis remained silent and continued drinking. He looked down at his phone and saw divorce paperwork in his mailbox. Episode 602. The West Family's USB. Clarissa had said that she would send him the divorce agreement, but he didn't expect it to be so soon. Louis reached out and scrolled through subconsciously. Why had there been so many people at Clarissa's fake marriage? Louis's eyes were in a bit of a trance. Before he scrolled to the bottom, the boy with a buzz cut suddenly said calmly,
I have news of Sherry.
Louis's hands suddenly stopped, and he stopped imagining. Not only him, but most of the people at the table were also attracted to look straight at the boy.
She's in the maximum security prison on the border. Ordinary people don't know about it.
The buzz-cut boy lowered his voice and looked at the people sitting down.
You know what they say, you're only called a king if successful.
Since the Flake family had failed, it wasn't surprising that it had come to this. The man wearing glasses nodded. Then he suddenly turned to Louis, having thought of another point.
Thank God Auntie was alert enough. Otherwise,
Evanston had experienced turmoil just a few months ago, and the news had been blocked by those major families. Most people only knew that the Miller family had suddenly come to power when the major families became public again. On the other hand, the Flake family had once again become low-key and hidden, and all of its businesses had been swallowed by their opponents. Louis had tried to contact Sherry's suitors many times, but had been helpless due to his lack of strength. Only then did he realize the gap between him and them. This was also one of the reasons why the Fay family had gone astray in the beginning and hooked up with the Klein family. Fortunately, Gloria had tried her best to prevent the Fay family from falling into turbid waters and had picked the Fay family out of a sticky situation. Otherwise, by the Clark family's means, the presence of the Fay family was still a question. Thinking of this, Louis was also afraid. He understood the Fay family's vulnerability in front of those major families. The children of countless wealthy families in Evanston had been fascinated by Sherry before. Sherry was a well-known lady and was even an intermediate member in 129. Thus, many people had a crush on her. The few people were silent for a while. Then, the buzz-cut teenager quickly changed his expression and smiled at Louis.
I heard that recently, you and Olivia have something fishy going on. Well, she does look a little like her.
Louis had always been clean and self-conscious, so the only reason he had become soft-hearted to a second-line actor was that Olivia was somewhat similar to Sherry in terms of growth experience and looks.
I'm going back to the company first.
Louis threw the wine glass blankly.
I have to discuss cooperation with WC Group tomorrow.
WC Group? The man wearing glasses was a little surprised.
The oldest son of the Wright family's own company. This man really has all sorts of means. Many domestic groups want to cooperate with him. Louis, you should be careful when you meet him.
The next day, Clarissa punched in at the company, completed the task of interviewing the elderly woman about her kitten, and then went to the airport. At the airport, wearing a cold black suit and standing silently at the exit, Kobe exuded an icy aura that no one dared to approach within 2 meters of him. Only Andrea stood not too far beside him. Clarissa carried her camera and walked in.
"Aunt, Lone Wolf asked me to take you to the hospital."
"Okay," Kobe said coldly and then turned around to leave.
"Wait, is Austria's trading ground your site?"
Clarissa asked.
Kobe glanced at her and said as cold as ever, "No."
Clarissa nodded and then smiled at Andrea.
"Aunt, that person is always like that. You're not frightened by him, right? I'll take you to the hospital now."
Bessy had ultimately been shocked in Devil City, and the baby's heart rate was a little unstable. Last night, Bessy had been held in the hospital by both the Miller and Clark families. Although Kobe's help had been requested because of Andrea, the Underground Alliance still had enmity with the 5 brothers. If the 2 forces collided, an explosion might happen. Since Kobe had personally sent Andrea here, and Clarissa was also on the way to the hospital to see Bessy, she didn't let the Miller and Clark families come here to meet Kobe. Other than Andrea's pale face and slightly tired expression, everything else seemed the same as before. Clarissa raised an eyebrow and took her to the hospital. Pete had 2 big bosses in the World Health Organization with him, Daniel and Michael. Naturally, he wasn't in any life-threatening danger. Not only was he sober now, but he also went upstairs to see Bessy in her ward. When Clarissa arrived, Pete and Bessy were sitting on the hospital bed. One was looking irritable, while the other was weak.
"Mom, Clarissa."
Pete quickly stood up to greet them. Putting down the camera on Bessy's bedstand, Clarissa turned to Pete.
"Pete, wow. Are you interested in joining me?"
Taken aback, Pete quickly shook his head.
"I don't study photography. You can find Scarlett."
Other than the 5 Clark brothers, few people knew Clarissa's real identity. They only knew that she was familiar with Jared, and maybe even suspected that she was from 129 as well. Although they didn't know what on earth she did, they still respected her very much.
Pfft, I'm just kidding. I won't dare to snatch you from Michael.
Clarissa waved him away lazily. Pete was the successor of the Physics Institute as appointed by Michael, so she didn't dare to snatch him away. She turned to Bessy and said, "I'll go find Michael." Bessy nodded casually, took out a USB from her pocket and threw it to Clarissa. She said unhurriedly, "He's in the laboratory on the 17th floor. The USB contains information on biochemical drugs from the West family 20 years ago." Her voice was clear and cold, and her complexion was slightly dry. Clarissa raised her hand to catch the USB, very surprised. No wonder the international group of criminals have been eyeing him. It turned out to be a biochemical drug, which had something to do with the order she took recently. Clarissa took the USB to find Michael on the 17th floor to ask about Gloria's heart disease. On the 17th floor, Zeke had also just finished discussing Bessy and the West family's affairs with Michael. After coming to a conclusion, he heaved a sigh of relief. Only then did he prepare to go out. He happened to bump into Clarissa.
"Clarissa, are you here to find someone?"
Zeke politely greeted her. His voice was slightly hoarse because he hadn't rested well, and his handsome face was now more slight. His slender eyebrows were slightly mellow. Clarissa was naturally very polite to Bessy's uncle. "Yes, I'm here to ask Dr. Clark something." She really couldn't address Michael so informally in front of Zeke. Zeke took 2 steps aside and made way for her.
"Clarissa? Clarissa?"
Inside, Marvin bumped into Clarissa after taking a printed document. His expression changed, and he greeted her respectfully.
"Miss Hale."
Marvin had been at Michael's beck and call, mainly because he had to face the deadly gaze of Big Boss Miller in the ward. His IQ had crashed from time to time, and he really couldn't maintain his composure now. Outside, Zeke, who was about to leave, couldn't help but chuckle when he saw this scene.
"Do you think that Miss Hale is a little familiar?"
The manager glanced at Clarissa thoughtfully. Zeke retracted his gaze.
"Let's go downstairs and take a look at Bessy."
The manager glanced at him sympathetically. The current film god wasn't just being forced to film a new movie every day, but most people on Twitter were urging him to update. Basically, the comments were, "Please, film god, please beg your niece to update soon, okay?" They were miserable.
"After seeing her, you'll have to go to the Austria's group as soon as possible."
The manager pressed the elevator door and said,
"It has already been delayed for 2 days."
In the afternoon, Clarissa handed the news materials to the boss, skipped work, and went back to her apartment. Raven admired that she was skipping work again. "Mom." Inside Clarissa's apartment, she held her phone to her ear and called Gloria. "I found a doctor for you. Go for the checkup tomorrow." She had made an appointment with Michael in the morning. Based on Clarissa's friendship with Bessy, Michael had to spare her one morning. On the other end of the phone, Gloria paused and stopped trimming the flowers and plants.
"A doctor?"
"Yes." Clarissa opened the refrigerator and took out a bottle of beer. She opened the lid with her teeth and took a sip before saying, "You have heart disease. This doctor is excellent, so you should let him do a complete workup. This way, I can rest assured during my business trip 2 days later." Gloria's heart immediately warmed. She originally wanted to tell Clarissa that she had sought countless doctors at home and abroad, to no avail. However, she didn't want to dampen Clarissa's spirits.
"Will you come with me tomorrow?"
she asked carefully. Holding the empty bottle in her hand, Clarissa stepped on the gray carpet with her snow-white feet and walked to the window. She glanced downstairs at the little community and thought for a while before smiling. "Okay, I'll go with you."
"That's good."
Gloria responded happily. Charles handed her the scissors again, smiling.
"Miss Hale really cares about you."
"Clarissa is a good child,"
She's talented, good-looking, and is a graduate of Vienna University. She even won a photography award at a young age.
Gloria massaged her eyebrows.
If only my son.
Charles remained silent at the mention of Louis. Louis's heart was bent on Sherry, and he had never once asked about Clarissa. In the past 3 years, he didn't even know where Clarissa worked. Gloria finished cutting a pot of flowers and plants, feeling like her son could still be saved. She really liked Clarissa as a daughter-in-law. Wasn't she so comforting to look at? Thinking of this, she called Louis.
Tomorrow, in the office.
Louis massaged his throbbing temples and hung up after saying a few more words.
It's difficult to make a move on Chairman Fay.
Opposite him, his secretary put down a file on his desk. He frowned when he saw his tormented frown. Chairman Fay?
It's nothing. I have to accompany my mother to the hospital tomorrow morning. Help me push back my schedules.
Louis said. Another secretary was taken aback. Why is Mrs. Fay going to the hospital?
Clarissa found a doctor for her. My mom asked us to accompany her.
Louis's eyes were dark. Upon hearing this, several people in the office exchanged glances. They were Louis's confidants, so they naturally knew that he was married. For so many years, it had been useless to find countless doctors to look at her condition. But Clarissa had found a doctor for Mrs. Fay, and they had even made it a big deal. They were afraid Clarissa was about to cause trouble again. Episode 603, On the 17th Floor. Gloria had sought a lot of doctors for her illness, but most of them had been helpless. They could only make her pay attention to her emotions and diet. The Fay family also had some status in Evanston, so the doctors that they had found were naturally famous heart surgeons. Despite that, they had been helpless. Now that Clarissa was taking Gloria to see another doctor, these men inevitably thought that she had something up her sleeves again. With an outstanding person like Sherry as a comparison, Clarissa barely made an impression in front of these people. Most of them only knew that she was inferior to the prestigious ladies in Evanston. It was only normal for them to have a prejudice against Clarissa. "Make some time tomorrow in the morning," Louis said after thinking for a while. The next discussion at WC was tomorrow afternoon, but Wesley wouldn't be present again. He could only listen to the WC seminar virtually tomorrow morning. Yes. The secretary took out a notepad and changed the schedule. But Mr. Wright is a little troublesome. It's not easy to make an appointment with him. Wesley was the CEO of WC at the age of 28. After returning as an elite, he was indeed extremely capable. If they were to meet face to face, the Fay Corporation might be slightly behind. Both the Fay Corporation and WC Group were in the media industry. Louis had good vision and was also very capable. This time, he and WC were discussing a media auction cooperation case. "Has anyone sent Wesley's information over?" Louis looked at the secretary. Many things in the business field had to fit somebody's fancy. The secretary nodded. "A gentleman sent it here before. I'll send it up." Louis was a successful businessman with a wide social network. Because of Sherry, he had met many well-known private investigators in the industry and had good relationships with them. "Chairman Fay, another The Realm of the Gods has been launched in Austria. When is it convenient for you to check it out?" The secretary flipped through the schedule. The Fay Corporation had invested $120 million in The Realm of Gods. There weren't many good sci-fi movies in the country. Louis did it because it was a domestic sci-fi movie and also to bring popularity to the Fay Corporation. He wouldn't suffer losses no matter the aspect. "It depends," Louis said lightly. It didn't take too long for him to receive the information from a private investigator. Sitting on the chair, He flipped through it and was very surprised by the contents. Wesley had been the top scorer in science in the final exams. He had continuously rejected Northwestern University and the University of Chicago recruits, and had been determined to enter Ohio State University's finance department. Then, he passed Vienna University's big financial project within 2 years. In the first year of school, he had followed a professor to take part in a project, obtained a certificate as a senior stock analyst, and was then thrown an olive branch by 2 well-known financial industry leaders. He had rejected all of them and created his own WC Group. His business philosophy was very strong, and he had received nearly $200 million in investments even before he registered the WC trademark. In the short span of 3 years, the WC Group had entered the world's top 500 businesses. He was a big financial talent of Ohio State University and Vienna University's top 10 outstanding students. He had a double degree in financial engineering and criminal investigation and was showcased as an upstart in the financial magazine. On the internet, he was compared with Luke of Northwestern University. They were both science majors and had secretly studied criminal investigation. His hobbies and interests were even listed below. This financial genius liked criminal investigation very much. After reading carefully, Lewis exhaled and had more of an understanding now. It was good to have a breakthrough, especially in the criminal investigation. He opened the drawer on the left and was about to put the document in when he saw the information about Clarissa that Sherry had investigated 3 years ago. At that time, he and Clarissa had been married for not too long, so he had asked Sherry to check on her. Sherry was a junior member of 129 and hadn't found much information about Clarissa. She worked in a newspaper agency, and there had been traces of her deliberately bumping against him several times. Lewis glanced over the information, hesitated for a moment, and then put Wesley's information document in. In the morning after working overtime, Lewis received a call from his mother, asking him to pick Clarissa up at her residence, then set off from the Fay family's house to the hospital. Upon hearing this, Lewis's headache worsened. He looked at his assistant driving the car and massaged his temples. "Go to her apartment." The assistant nodded respectfully and glanced in the rearview mirror without saying anything. He conscientiously drove to Clarissa's residence. Clarissa lived in the old part of the city, where the price of housing wasn't very high. This area was very lively, and the fresh morning air could be felt when passing by the breakfast place. There was a famous breakfast spot where the queue lined up at the end of the street in the morning. In the small area, a group of people were doing yoga early in the morning, and some others had gathered for brunch. "Isn't that Mr. Jensen?" The assistant looked at the older man heading to the yoga group and was surprised. The recent rise of webcomics had caused that culture to become even more popular. As the main influencer of webcomics culture in popular social circles, Mr. Jensen had been popular on the internet after videos of his poses had been popularized. The most important thing was that he was a treasure of material culture and was considered a national treasure. This was a hot spot for videos. Most of the Fay Corporation's employees knew Mr. Jensen. Lewis was also very surprised to see him here. He didn't expect Mr. Jensen to live in such a down-to-earth place. But watching Mr. Jensen practicing yoga, he didn't interrupt and only secretly noted this. Lewis and Clarissa had always been very different. He seldom came to find her and had never entered her room before. This time, her address had even been given by Gloria. He went downstairs and called Clarissa. Clarissa only indifferently told him to wait. Lewis frowned and was about to go in. As soon as he stopped by the elevator, The door opened, and a man wearing a white shirt and black socks stood leaning on the left. He had one hand in his pocket and his eyebrows were drooping. Louis was stunned.
"Mr. Wright, why are you here?"
This person was Wesley, the person he couldn't make an appointment with. Upon hearing this, Wesley also raised his head, his eyebrows energetic and young. Upon a closer look, there was a faint depression, and his gaze became even more complicated when he saw Louis. He just nodded slightly at him.
"I came to find someone."
He directly left after that. Beside him, Louis's assistant stared at Wesley's back, extremely surprised.
"Why is President Wright here?"
Louis shook his head. According to the information, Wesley's home was in the urban area. If he had come here so early, it must have been someone very important to him. It was 5 minutes before Clarissa came down. Instead of having her hair tied today, she had it casually draped on her shoulders. She was wearing a light blue floral dress and wore rare black glasses on the bridge of her nose. She came out of the elevator slovenly dressed and wearing flip-flops. This building wasn't far from the gate, and the assistant's car was also parked outside. Clarissa walked in front of Louis, and the elderly passing by stopped to greet her.
"Clarissa, good morning."
"Is Clarissa going out so early?" Clarissa responded with a smile and greeted every person who called her. She was gentle and patient with each one of them. Looking at her back, Louis suddenly remembered that he had always seen Gloria watching Clarissa's interview videos. Most of them were trivial and homely videos of old people online, which few people watched nowadays. They passed by the group of people practicing yoga. The old man wearing a white sweatsuit took the lead and stopped directly.
"Clarissa, see if I'm right. Is this the lotus pose?"
He excitedly demonstrated to Clarissa and then pointed to another old man.
"This old man said I was wrong. You be the judge." "You're obviously wrong."
Another old man came over, red in the face.
"Clarissa, show him."
Clarissa had always had a way to deal with the elderly. She casually made a big gesture and said, with her drooping eyebrows patient and serious, "Grandpa Bryant, Grandpa Jensen's move is the new version of the lotus pose. Yours is the traditional lotus pose." Within 3 minutes, the matter was resolved. Louis's assistant watched as she went to the famous breakfast shop, weaved past the crowd, and directly took 2 croissants. He couldn't resist himself and finally asked why she was so familiar with Mr. Jensen.
"Ma'am, have you learnt yoga before?"
Even if her movement was amateurish, it had looked like the real deal. Clarissa took a bite of the croissant, then took a picture before sending it to Bessy. "Look at this croissant. Isn't it fragrant?" She replied to the assistant after sending it. "I took part in a yoga club at university." Louis glanced at her in the back seat and said nothing. The car went straight to the Fay family's mansion. Gloria was already waiting at the door and was obviously very happy to see them coming together. They all got into a limousine. Gloria sat with Clarissa while Louis sat alone. He pulled the table out, put down the computer and listened to the meeting on the way. They soon arrived at the hospital. Clarissa went straight to the inpatient department and pressed 2 floors, the 15th and 17th floors. Charles asked intimately,
"Clarissa, the doctor you made an appointment with is an inpatient doctor? Which floor is he on?"
He wondered which cardiologists were in the inpatient department of a hospital. "Go to the 17th floor first. Someone will take you there." Clarissa arrived on the 15th floor and carried a bag of pastries out. "I'll give my friend her breakfast first and then come over right away." The breakfast shop next to her house was very famous, and she had already told Bessy that she would bring her food in the morning. The elevator continued going upwards. When Clarissa was gone, Louis looked at Gloria helplessly. Gloria was indifferent.
I'm happy that Clarissa is so considerate. I'll just humor her and see the doctor. You're not allowed to ask anything, nor discourage her."
She had seen so many professional doctors to no avail, and she had only promised Clarissa today because she didn't want to let down her kind intentions. As for whether the doctor could treat her illness, she and the Fay family had long been helpless. Ding! They reached the 17th floor. As soon as the elevator opened, Gloria and the others were surprised to see what was on the 17th floor. The furnishings didn't look like an inpatient department at all. There were no traces of patients and family members, but there were many nurses and doctors. Before they regained their composure, a nurse came over and asked, "Are you Miss Fay that Miss Wilson talked about? Please come with me." Episode 604. I've signed the divorce papers and hired a lawyer. Miss Wilson? Was this referring to Clarissa? But wasn't her last name Hale? The few family members that were present exchanged looks. Gloria was shocked as well, but followed the nurse to the hallway anyway. The 17th floor looked different from their imagination. It was only when they got closer did they realize that the room close to the hallway wasn't fully enclosed. There were glass windows on two sides of the rooms, and one could see the medical apparatus inside through them. Louis was on the phone with his childhood friend and was stunned when he saw this scene.
"You said you bumped into Wesley? Where?"
Louis's childhood friend's voice on the other end of the phone pulled his thoughts back. Louis took his gaze off of the scene and slipped away from behind Gloria. The nurse leading the way now stopped before a door and politely knocked on it. Louis casually said,
"I've already sent someone to check. It's still in the hospital. We can only get the results in the afternoon."
He and his childhood friend had always talked about all things in life, so his friend had already known the previous day that he was accompanying Gloria to the doctor. It would have been all right if this took place some other time, but the Fay Corporation was dealing with urgent matters now. His childhood friend couldn't help but say,
"Only you would make the extra trip down with her. The both of you should just divorce sooner so you can save yourself the trouble. Let your mom say all she wants if she's unhappy."
The nurse in front opened the door and let the two of them enter. Louis simply went, and then followed his mother in while talking about the divorce paperwork. It seemed like he needed to find some time to talk to Clarissa about it. Before him, Charles was saying to Gloria,
"Clarissa is very thoughtful. She must have found you a good—"
He looked up as he said that and saw Dean Clark standing by the table. Dean Clark spoke very politely to the other party in the seat. Charles and Clarissa had come to the hospital countless times. Although they weren't especially close to Dean Clark, they could strike up a brief conversation with him. After their initial surprise, their gaze landed on the person in the seat. His white coat was wide open, and he was sitting diagonally across the bench. Seeing that they had been brought in, he looked up and slowly straightened his posture, causing the light pouring through the windows to light up his face.
"Please take a seat."
He had a pen in one hand while his other hand was busy operating the apparatus. Under the bright white light, one could see his long and slender fingers at work. Michael kept a low profile in the industry. His name was heard of far and wide, even in the capital, but few had seen him in person. The Fay family had some unhappiness with the Clark family a while ago, so Louis and Gloria had seen Michael before. But when they saw him this time, both Gloria and Louis seemed to be caught by surprise. They weren't sure how to react to this, but the first thing that came to their minds was these words: "The Clark family's crown prince." 2 years back, the Clark family's crown prince demonstrated his extraordinary talent in the medical field. His reputation skyrocketed when he managed to successfully operate on a frozen man, whose chances of survival were practically non-existent. From that point on, he focused solely on complex diseases. He took on one tough case every few months and would research it, leaving behind precious and useful information for the medical field. Thus far, he'd noted down 10 new skill sets that allowed modern medicine to bring new hope to once hopeless cases, providing these supposedly terminally ill patients a chance at survival. Nobody knew how he managed to tackle these complex diseases and illnesses. They simply knew that even the World Health Organization labeled him as a miracle in the history of medicine. One could say that Bessy sped up the advancement of the IT field by 20 years, while he took the medical field to yet another apex. The Fay family had thought of going to Michael even a few years back, but Gloria's condition was not really a complex disease, as it could still be kept in control under medication. More importantly, how could the Fay family even be powerful enough to get Michael's help?
Mr. Clark.
Charles looked at Michael, who was conducting the checkup for Gloria, and then turned to Louis. He spoke almost mechanically.
The doctor Clarissa found was actually Michael Clark?
Louis was standing by the door and in disbelief as well. He had not hung up the call and could still hear the voice of his childhood friend. Downstairs, Zeke was in the ward when Clarissa entered. He was in a dark blue striped shirt and low-rise jeans, carefully dicing apples and poking toothpicks into them before handing them to Bessy. "We're setting off today?" Bessy picked up a toothpick and looked at him. Zeke chuckled and seemed to radiate a warm glow. He gently tapped her on the forehead and affectionately advised her.
"It'll take about a month or two. You take good care of yourself so your father won't have to worry."
"I know." Bessy had one hand behind her head as she leaned back on the headboard. Having finished a piece of apple, she did not reach for more. Instead, she nibbled on the toothpick. Zeke sized her up. Seeing her like this, he squinted and thought of letting Michael know about it before leaving. He turned around and was about to leave when he bumped into Clarissa at the door. Zeke nodded politely at her as he put on his mask. Clarissa only tossed the pastries to Bessy after he left. "Catch." Bessy caught it perfectly and opened the bag. There was a cup of soy milk and 2 pastries. She spat out her toothpick and took a bite of a croissant. It was a golden, flaky croissant with no filling, and it tasted all right. Bessy slowed down her eating and looked at Clarissa a little expressionlessly. "Are you trying to fight me today?" Clarissa did not say anything. Bessy slowly took another bite of her croissant and side-eyed her. "You won't beat me." Clarissa was speechless. She walked over and tore open a bit of the croissant. There was no filling inside. Clarissa said, "Raven got me to pack some breakfast for her before. She likes plain croissants. I forgot to tell them this time." Clarissa was rather similar to Bessy. Both of them did not have much patience and often just went to any stall that caught their eye. The pastry stall downstairs was so popular, and she didn't have the patience to stand in line to buy it. Hence, she invested $2.5 million a few years back in this stall. For as long as she was in Evanston, the stall would prepare her breakfast for her. She had no idea that this stall was already popular nationwide. With her shares in the stall, her net worth was as high as a few $1,000,000. The last chocolate croissant eventually went to Marvin, who had come down from upstairs. "Film God is going to Austria?" Clarissa was sitting on the hospital bed and eating an apple casually. Bessy nibbled on the straw this time. "To film The Realm of the Gods." Clarissa nodded in understanding and reached for another piece of apple. Michael's report was out. Clarissa took her cell phone out to see it. At first glance, she picked up a lot of jargon and couldn't quite understand what it meant, but she did understand the final diagnosis. "Can be treated with surgery." Clarissa finished the apples slowly, She looked at the diagnosis for a few moments before tightening her grip on her cell phone and standing up abruptly. I can go abroad without worries now. Help me thank Michael. I'll be looking for Mr. Barnes first. She decided to give the 17th floor a miss, as she figured that she'd be held back by Gloria and Charles if she made an appearance. Marvin hurriedly swallowed the last mouthful of his croissant.
Miss Hale, I'll take you there.
Clarissa gave the lawyer a call and stuck her other hand in her pocket. Mr. Barnes, I've handed you the documents you want. I'll be going on a business trip tomorrow.
Don't worry, leave it to me.
Mr. Barnes sounded serious on the other end. Marvin stood at the elevator and watched expressionlessly as Clarissa smilingly put her cell phone back in her pocket. The renowned lawyer in the capital, who had fought cases with stakes as high as billions of dollars, was now handling a divorce case. The Fay family got a shock from Clarissa, but having waited for a full day, they still did not see Clarissa return. Gloria gave Clarissa a call. Clarissa simply said that she was rushing to go on a business trip. When they headed to Clarissa's residence, her neighbors said the same about her going on a trip. Gloria and Charles were not exactly shocked by Clarissa's temporary disappearance. However, Louis wasn't used to it. He knew too little about this wife in name.
For real? She found that Clark guy? I remember that besides Joshua, who was in the military, the rest of the family was rather scholarly. I didn't expect them to have such connections.
At night, Louis was downing some drinks at the bar, seemingly deep in thought. The few childhood fans around him turned to look at one another in disbelief when they heard the news. Louis shook his head. His cell phone lit up, and he looked through it while saying,
I heard the butler say that she followed through the entire research process when the Y3 virus broke out in Evanston back then.
Clarissa was a reporter, and his childhood friends knew that, but her field of work was too different from theirs, so they never bothered much about it. They simply did not expect her to have followed through with the medical research in Evanston.
It's no wonder she managed to find the Clark fellow. She must be doing pretty well in her job,
a young man said in shock. Louis had a strange and complex expression on his face. He remembered Gloria mentioning that Clarissa had received many photography awards before, but he never really thought much about it. As he thought about it now, he opened the notification on his cell phone. It was from Clarissa, who was currently nowhere to be found. I've signed the divorce papers. My lawyer will be looking you up tomorrow. Nothing more. Louis was stunned to read this message. He left his cell phone lying on the table, and his childhood friend took a glance at it. He was completely shocked by the message.
She signed the divorce papers? Louis, you have to hide this from your mom. If she knows about it, you won't be able to get this divorce again. Hold on. Could she have told your mom already? Hurry and ask her.
Episode 605. Something's brewing in Austria. Louis snapped out of his daze when he heard what his friend said. His expression darkened as he recalled his first divorce 2 years back. Gloria had found out about it and almost passed away from a heart attack. Sherry had found out that it was Clarissa who had privately got someone to inform Gloria about it. From that point onward, Louis dared not bring up the topic of divorce to Gloria. On that thought, Louis gave the Fay family a call. Charles picked up the phone, and he sounded surprised.
Louis, it's late. Is anything the matter?
From the way Charles spoke, it seemed like nothing had taken place at home. Louis tightened his grip on his cell phone, but mellowed his tone.
Is my mom resting yet? She just ended a video call with Clarissa and is in a good mood.
Charles chuckled.
Is she? What did they talk about?
Louis's eyes went deep. Charles was still smiling when he said,
Clarissa has already gone overseas. She said she'd bring some local products back for your mother when she returns.
She did not bring up the matter of divorce after all. Louis heaved a sigh of relief and hung up soon after. The next day at 9 o'clock in the morning, Louis was in a meeting room discussing WC Group with a few others. Time was tight. Nobody had produced any satisfactory proposal for Louis in the past 2 days. As for Wesley, Louis sent his subordinate to contact him, as he would have liked.
The planning department shall draw up another proposal for the sound effects. As for the spokesperson, let's have Olivia.
Louis interrupted the proposal.
Our publicity has been excellent recently, and we're getting increasingly popular. We can't fumble at this point.
As the fantasy show The Realm of Gods made its name overseas, the other Fae family products grew in popularity as well. It wasn't surprising that he wanted Olivia to be the spokesperson for the Fae family products. First, she was the second female lead in The Realm of Gods. Second, it was also obvious that Louis treated Olivia differently. Louis gave his instructions and then returned to his office. The secretary was waiting for him at the door. "Chairman Faye, Clarissa's lawyer has been waiting for you."
"Let him in."
Louis paused for a moment and then ordered. The secretary went to the lounge to get the lawyer. Louis went back to his seat and thought about the divorce agreement. Back then, he and Clarissa had had a deal. They were not to interfere with each other's matters after marriage. Besides the matters concerning his mother, he was still rather satisfied with Clarissa in all other aspects. Louis was still thinking about it when his secretary brought Clarissa's lawyer in. The lawyer was in a tidy black suit and had a work bag with him. His demeanor was rather imposing, and even his eyes were intimidating, despite his smile.
"Hello, Mr. Fay. I'm Miss Hale's lawyer, Mr. Barnes."
He took the divorce agreement out and handed it to him. Louis had seen the divorce agreement before and was going through it again. Clarissa had made it very clear in the agreement that she did not want a single cent from the Fay family. He couldn't help but look up and say,
"Take this clause off. I will give her an apartment in the 1st District and an additional $2.5 million.
Mr. Barnes continued smiling. He had never handled a divorce case before, but he knew enough about law and the human heart. In less than an hour, Louis signed the legally effective divorce agreement. There were 2 sets of it. Mr. Barnes kept one of them, bade Louis farewell, and headed to the courthouse to file the paperwork. As for Louis, he held on to the other set and watched as Josiah took his leave. He seemed rather surprised as he mumbled,
"This Mr. Barnes sounds familiar."
Especially because his aura was extraordinary. But Louis did not want to think too much about it anymore. He looked at the agreement in his hands and sighed in relief. He finally got a divorce. A week later, Austria. Clarissa was holding a can of beer as she stood by a vending machine. She had an earbud in one ear as she called Jared. "Jared, I sent a confidential file over." Jared, who was on the other end, took a look and said,
"You're still in Austria, right? I've got another case that I'll need you to check on. Milo is laundering money in Austria's film studios."
Clarissa popped open the can and started drinking it. She narrowed her eyes and said, "Send me the information."
"It isn't safe to mess around in Austria. Do you need Lone Wolf to forge a document for you?"
Jared asked. "No need. I have a photography pass." It was a film studio. Photographers would be able to find their way in. She hung up and applied for leave at her workplace. Not too far off, Raven was carrying 2 bags of bread and hurrying over. "I'm sorry, Clarissa. There were too many people at the supermarket. Can we still make it for the flight?" "No need." Clarissa downed her last sip of beer as she received the information that Jared had just sent. She looked through it as she said, "I won't be returning at the moment. You can take the interview draft back." At this moment, Raven received a call from the company. "Clarissa, the editor-in-chief wants me to stay with you and head down to the film studio again. There's been a huge case of a missing student there. We need to follow up on it." Raven said as she held onto her cell phone. Clarissa nodded. Let's go there then. How do we get there, Clarissa? Raven contacted the person who'd brought them around Austria. Her brows furrowed together in worry. We can't move about Austria on our own if we can't find the person who took us around. It was strange. There would usually be someone around to receive them. After all, Austria was too dangerous. Do you have a valid driving license for Austria? Clarissa flattened her beer can before Raven was done talking. Raven nodded, as if in a daze. Yes? That's fine then. Clarissa gave her a thumbs up. Wait here. In less than 10 minutes, a black car stopped by Clarissa's side. The person in the driver's seat politely handed the key and the pass into Austria to her. Clarissa had already had a drink, so she didn't take the driver's seat. She placed the camera in the back seat and got Raven to take the wheel. Find your way on your own. Raven took the keys in a daze and then went to start the car. Slightly over half an hour later, they arrived at the film base. Austria's film base was the largest in the world. Clarissa was sleeping in the car. She was awoken by a phone ringing. Hello? She picked up the call while yawning.
I heard you're in business.
It was the voice of a middle-aged man. Then he said with some fury as he growled,
Are you expressionless? The person you guys sent has already died for you, and you won't even shed a tear.
After scolding on the other end, he suddenly said to Clarissa before she could respond,
I have a scene here to take, and the actors aren't giving me what I want. Come over and help me analyze it. There's also a solo commercial photo shoot. Help me shoot that.
Sure. Clarissa responded with a languid tone and received an address a few seconds later. She and Raven got out of the car. Clarissa, where are we going? Raven was carrying the camera as they found their way through the crowd. To look for the director. Clarissa rolled up her sleeves. The people in Austria all seemed rather fierce. Raven dared not make eye contact with just anyone. She quietly and obediently followed behind Clarissa. Clarissa had just arrived at the Film City Center when a young man wearing a snapback the other way around spotted Clarissa.
Clarissa, you're here. Director Simpson is about to scold the newbies to death.
He pointed in a direction and gestured for Clarissa to enter, but he dared not enter himself. From afar, she could already see that the legendary Director Simpson had already stopped filming. He was now talking about the show with a man opposite him. Director Simpson seemed to be in a much better mood now. Clarissa hadn't said a thing. Then, a man's voice sounded behind her.
Miss Hale, what are you doing here?
It was a familiar voice. Clarissa furrowed her brows and turned around. She saw Louis and his secretary looking at her. Beside Louis was another rather tall woman. The secretary intuitively frowned too. It was the secretary who called out to her. Meanwhile, Louis's eyes were full of emotions. He thought about it. There must be a reason for Clarissa to file for divorce so swiftly. Raven knew who Louis was. She'd even seen some tabloids of him before. Clarissa probably felt like she owed Louis money in her past life. They were bumping into each other everywhere. It was no wonder Louis suspected that she was stalking him. I have something on here. Clarissa was holding the camera. This is... The woman standing beside Louis said as she looked at Clarissa. Louis's secretary hurriedly said,
Miss Song, she's the reporter for New Media. She's here for some news.
I see. Olivia's eyes seemed to exude flamboyance as she smiled at Clarissa. Louis, get them to leave. Director Simpson and Film God don't like having paparazzi around. Moreover, Director Simpson is not in a good mood today. If he finds out they're here, it won't end well. Her tone made Raven feel uncomfortable. Clarissa's divorce was a very private matter, and few knew about it. Raven had no idea that they had divorced, and she now looked at Louis and Olivia in anger.
"Clarissa."
Louis took a step forward and held Clarissa's elbow as he said to her. He whispered as his eyes went cold.
"We're already divorced. You better not cause any trouble here."
Clarissa shook her arm free easily. Having gotten a divorce from him, she didn't even bother to patronize Louis. Louis looked up in annoyance. Clarissa walked right past him and headed in.
"Clarissa!"
At this point, someone rushed out from inside with a flask. Louis couldn't be bothered with her anymore. He saw the person coming out and greeted respectfully.
"Mr. Wilson."
Given Zeke's current standing, Hudson also had to be treated with respect even by the few well-to-do young men in the capital. This was also why Louis addressed him as Mr. Wilson. Olivia's expression changed as she greeted courteously as well. Mr. Wilson. Louis was one of the investors for the Realm of the Gods, and Hudson knew him too. He smiled and said hi to Louis, but then felt something was off. He was holding his flask when he appeared to remember something. He quickly turned around and shuddered when he saw Clarissa's back view.
Miss Hale?
Was something about to happen at the film studio? Episode 606. Was Clarissa so well respected? The manager was a little shocked to see Clarissa here. After all, he remembered that Clarissa had sat at the second table at Bessy's wedding. Although Bessy spoke very casually with Clarissa, the manager knew that she was being serious. She actually addressed her as Miss Hale. Upon hearing him, Clarissa turned around and saw Hudson. Clarissa didn't have much contact with the Miller family, but she did have an excellent memory and recognized Hudson right away, having spoken to him before. She raised a brow and asked, "You're filming here?"
"Yeah."
Seeing that she was here, Hudson didn't intend to go out anymore. He stood right there with a flask in his hand and seemed a little stiff.
"Miss Hale, what are you doing here?"
"To look for Director Simpson." This was the film studio, so it wasn't surprising to see Bessy's uncle here. "I'd just like to get some news, by the way." Hudson watched as Clarissa went to look for Director Simpson. It was only after she walked around the tree and approached Director Simpson and Zeke that he looked away.
"Chairman Fay, I've got to get something for Film God."
Hudson turned around and bade Louis farewell. His tone sounded a little less serious this time. Louis looked at Clarissa for a few seconds before Hudson nodded. Hudson took his leave thereafter. Louis looked away from him and back in Clarissa's direction. She casually grabbed Director Simpson's personal stool from the side and sat on it. The hot-tempered director simply glanced at her, but did not say a thing. Ever since the two newbies angered the director, the atmosphere on the film set went cold. Besides Film God, nobody dared to even breathe. Seeing that Clarissa's bold move had gotten no reaction from Director Simpson, most of the crew members began looking in her direction quietly. Louis showed some shock too, but he quickly concealed it. He was here just for two reasons. First, to check on the Realm of the Gods filming progress. Second, to discuss with Olivia about her being the spokesperson. He hadn't expected to bump into Clarissa here.
"I'll go and say hi to Director Simpson,"
he said quietly. Director Simpson wasn't in a good mood now. Olivia was one of the better actresses among the current popular ones, but with Zeke around, she had been getting scolded a lot. She dared not walk over there with Louis. She simply stood in her place and eyed Clarissa. "Miss Song." She was deep in thought when a woman in her costume carefully came over and called her out. The woman's eyes were a little bloodshot, as if she'd just cried. She turned towards Louis and asked, "Who's the woman speaking to Chairman Fay? They seem close?" This woman was Christy Bright, a supporting actress in The Realm of Gods. It was Olivia who brought her to relative fame. Olivia was standing upright and looking at Louis's back. She pursed her lips and said, "You should be right. She's probably his wife in their private marriage." Given the slip of tongue by Lewis's secretary, Olivia could come to this conclusion. "She's the one that Drew was talking about?" Christy looked at Clarissa with wide eyes. "She doesn't seem special or anything. Did she come over the moment she heard that Chairman Fay would come to look for you?" Olivia did not respond. Christy went on her own. "How is she even comparable to you? Ma'am, don't you worry. Chairman Fay came all this way to the film set to see you. And even the advertisements in the Fay Corporation are yours. That shows that his heart is still with you. Drew is definitely right to say that their marriage is just a transactional agreement." On Director Simpson's side, Clarissa was still sitting on the stool. When Raven walked over with her just now, she immediately recognized that the director Clarissa was here for was the famous Director Simpson who had invited Clarissa to perform previously. So, these two knew each other? And this important and slender figure by Director Simpson's side was Film God? In person. Alive. She's dead. Zeke was holding the script in one hand and a cigarette in his other. He leaned back in his chair and studied the script. Only when he snapped out of his thoughts did he notice Clarissa and Raven. He glimpsed Raven's shocked expression. Zeke stubbed his cigarette in the ashtray and smiled. "I'm sorry. You know each other?" Director Simpson closed the script and looked at him in shock. "She's my niece's best friend." Zeke picked up his teacup again and leaned back in his seat. There was talk about Film God's niece in the entertainment circle, too. Apparently, she was someone whose name should not be mentioned. Director Simpson glanced at Clarissa and then shook his head. He then tossed the script towards her. "All right then, let's do it this way. The assistant cameraman and the two actors for Scene 13 aren't good, especially the actors. Film God couldn't manage to keep them immersed in their characters. You go over there and guide them through it. And he's a cameraman from Northwestern University. I feel ashamed for Northwestern University already." Director Simpson was ranting again. He got Clarissa to go over. Lewis and his secretary heard Director Simpson's orders when they were walking over. They were both shocked to hear that. And the secretary asked before Lewis had a chance to. "Director Simpson, you're letting her do the filming? Isn't Miss Hale a reporter?" "The main cameraman is on leave and the assistant one isn't good enough. Clarissa is better than him no matter what. I especially got her here when I found out that she's in Austria. Otherwise, I wouldn't be getting any help in 2 days. Don't worry, Chairman Fay. We won't be delayed even though the chief photographer isn't here today." Director Simpson was rather polite towards Lewis, his investor, too. Upon hearing Director Simpson's explanation, the secretary opened his mouth in shock. Was Clarissa so well respected? Episode 607. Clarissa's Credentials. Director Simpson was known by all to be extremely strict. He was an artist who made an impact in the entertainment industry. His works had won countless awards and groomed too many film gods and empresses to count. Even the honorable film god now had been told off by him before, back in the day. Then again, after so many years, he had only openly complimented film god before. All the other artists were scolded time and again whenever they filmed with him. At this point, the secretary turned to Lewis with a strange expression. So, his ex-wife was here, purely by chance? Lewis pursed his lips as well. "I didn't expect Director Simpson to know the paparazzi, too," Lewis said as he kept his eyes on Clarissa and Zeke. His expression and tone hadn't changed. "I thought that those in your line of work wouldn't like the paparazzi." "Paparazzi?" Director Simpson was shocked to hear him describe her this way. When he reacted to it, he responded with a cold smile. "Who knew that she'd learned to film for so many years and ended up like this?
So she interviews cats and dogs and little animals every day.
Director Simpson got even more furious when he mentioned this.
Hey, Director Simpson, what are you angry about? It's not as if you don't know this, Miss Hale.
The elderly person beside Director Simpson hurriedly got him a cup of water.
She just enjoys running about, just like other young people. And although she does this, doesn't she always return with an award-winning work?
Only then did Director Simpson tip his chin up and follow Lewis out. The outdoor scene. Zeke was thinking about the script while walking and did not say much to Clarissa. As they arrived at the film set, Clarissa went to the crew members and set up the equipment. The main chairman wasn't around, and the assistant cameraman was slightly surprised to hear that Clarissa would take over in deciding on the positioning today. This scene mainly involved Zeke, Christy, and 2 other actors. Christy was the newbie who had been told off several times today by Director Simpson. Without the main cameraman around, the assistant cameraman was unable to get the effect that Director Simpson wanted. They were stuck on scene 13 for the entire day so far. She was standing before the main camera and conversing with a few of the crew members around. She had her glasses on and wasn't really stunning, considering that there were other female celebrities around, but her presence was impossible to ignore. A few of them hurriedly nodded, and one even went to speak to Christy. She stood in the center of the few crew members and adjusted the lighting, angles, and the like. Then, she took a few steps back to the main camera. Clarissa knew what Director Simpson wanted. In terms of filming, the depth that she could capture and portray wasn't too far off from him. They had to cut the scene twice because of Christy. But after the 5th run, they finally got a good take. The background setting was built with a huge amount of money. Zeke was holding a sword while kneeling on one knee. He looked up at the sky, revealing a scar that went from his cheek to his chin. His gaze was serious, and his performance was flawless and impactful. Clarissa picked up the camera she hardly ever used, found a good angle, and captured a shot. At this point, the renowned landscape photographer had just shot a human subject. After the shoot, Christy thanked the assistant cameraman sitting by the side. The assistant cameraman was roughly 30 years old. He said, "I wasn't of much help. You've done so many adjustments the whole time. I was wondering why Director Simpson decided to let that reporter take over this role." Christy turned towards Clarissa. The assistant cameraman straightened up. "You know her?" "Yeah, she's a local news reporter in Evanston and has even been a paparazzi before. I've heard of her." Christy smiled. Her job was nothing compared to their legitimate cameramen. The assistant cameraman was a little stunned. "I've seen the footage. She's better than me." She graduated from Ohio State University as an arts student. Who knows if she came through the back door to get here? Christy lowered her volume. Ohio State University was inferior to the top 2 universities in the nation. Their arts facility was also not outstanding. If one entered their music and performing arts program, it meant that their humanities results were definitely terrible. At night, Lewis treated the crew to dinner. Since there was an investor here, Director Simpson allowed the crew to be on leave that night. "Ma'am, you're really something," Christy said to Olivia. A few others turned to look at them. Olivia had had many scandals with Lewis before, and it wasn't a secret in the industry anymore. Moreover, Olivia was a newbie and managed to work with Film God so early in her career. Everyone could tell that something was going on between her and Lewis. Lewis had always had a good reputation. Besides his scandals with Olivia, he was never involved with other women. The crew took up 3 tables. The key members, Director Simpson, Lewis, Zeke, and Olivia, were at the same table. The 3 of them were unequivocally the most important people there. Clarissa sat beside Zeke, and Raven managed to take the seat beside her. Thanks to Clarissa, Raven was sitting just 2 seats away from Zeke. She was so excited that she could barely hold her fork. At the table were the investor Lewis, Director Simpson, and a few other businessmen. Given this setting, Christy naturally had to entertain the men. She ended up downing drink after drink. The atmosphere was lively. Clarissa took a bottle of beer first. Seeing that she had grabbed the beer, Zeke handed the bottle opener beside him to her. With Bessy's lens filter around, Zeke naturally took better care of her. Just as he handed the bottle opener to her, he saw Clarissa remove the bottle cap with her teeth. The bottle cap landed beside her on the table and even spun for a bit. Zeke chuckled as he saw that. He put the bottle opener down and said, "Have something to eat first before you drink." He turned the Lazy Susan such that the side dishes stopped before her and then continued speaking to Director Simpson. Opposite them, Lewis's gaze was fixated on Clarissa. After the meal, Christy finally found the chance to look Clarissa in the eye and express her thanks. "Thank you so much for today, Miss Hale. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't know how long more I'd delay the crew." Clarissa raised her beer. "No problem. Given Miss Hale's filming technique and skill, you must be a filmography major from the University of Chicago," Christy exclaimed. The filmography course at the University of Chicago is internationally recognized and extremely prestigious. It is just second to the law facility, and one has to score very well on all subjects to get in. "You're amazing." Clarissa looked up and glanced at her. "I studied at Ohio State University. Forgot my score." Christy smiled with some embarrassment when she heard her response, but the people sitting around had already heard her. The filmography course at Ohio State University was not legitimate at all, if not for the fact that they had the name Ohio State University. Director Simpson's movies were always produced with the best team possible. The assistant cameraman was a Northwestern University filmography graduate, and the rest of the crew was not too far off. But Clarissa... At night, Clarissa and Raven stayed in the hotel that the crew members were staying in. She was contacting the police in Austria and wanted them to send her information about the missing student case. Raven snapped back to her senses and saw that she was going through a missing student case. She glared at Clarissa. "Clarissa, you're looking at a police case?" "I asked them for it and they gave it to me. The police in Austria are pretty nice." Clarissa replied. "Oh." Raven nodded. Was every police officer in Austria so casual about things? At the same time, one floor above them in Zeke's room. He was going through the script for the next day. Outside, the suite's manager entered with a frown. "Film God, there's some rumor going on in the crew." It was regarding Clarissa. A lot of people were discussing her iffy background privately. She wasn't experienced, nor did she have a good degree to give her any power to call the shots in the crew. The Miller family were all protective of the underdogs. Clarissa was Film God's niece's good friend. He couldn't possibly just stand by and not do anything. He put down his script and thought about it. At night, he gave Bessy a call and asked, "That reporter friend of yours, how are her results?" "Why?" Bessy tossed her notebook aside on the other end. Film God explained it to her calmly. There was silence on her side for 2 seconds before she said, "Give me a moment." Bessy hung up. 3 minutes later, Bessy sent Clarissa's data and transcripts to him. Film God took a look at it. He went silent when he read the second line. Episode 608, A Smiling Spy. In addition to some hidden information, Clarissa's resume of earlier years was also easy to check online. It wasn't a secret. Bessy easily adjusted the files and then did another for Zeke. which she took a curious look at. As long as the results were recorded in the file, she transferred them all.
"How does it look?"
The manager leaned over and looked. He knew Clarissa must be very good at photography for Director Simpson to place so much importance on it. But he didn't expect it to be so outstanding. Clarissa had studied liberal arts and had almost gotten full marks in every subject from elementary school to high school. Although she had chosen liberal arts, her grades had all been excellent. She had majored in photography, and 2 photos from her were auctioned for $7 million. The manager didn't have an artistic bone in his body and couldn't appreciate her artwork. Although Clarissa's main major was photography, her second major was actually criminal investigation. After entering Ohio State University, she was admitted to the Vienna University of Music and Performing Arts by herself. Most importantly, after entering Vienna University, she had even cooperated with the CIA in several major informational cases. After reading it, the manager withdrew his gaze with a bewildered expression, remembering the violent second profession incident of top students on Twitter. After a long while, he slowly said,
"My niece's friends are all of this level?"
Zeke jumped to this page and also chuckled.
"Very good."
He didn't expect that the smiley reporter was actually walking on the edge of danger. Working with the CIA wasn't a small matter. The manager also retracted his gaze, thinking about what he had just seen and murmuring subconsciously,
"I wonder why she went to study liberal arts despite her good grades in science. She even won a chemistry competition award in junior high school."
Zeke raised his eyes and put the mobile phone back on the table.
"She just seeks a different thing. Get ready. I'll go out later."
"Where?" The manager was used to it. Back then, Zeke had fought back the Miller family from the hands of Gabriel and the Flake family and had even found James. The manager knew his methods were out of the ordinary. Although James had also worked hard, the huge ability of the Miller family had a lot to do with Zeke's contribution. Compared with him, James had a natural gap.
"James has a contract. I've made an appointment with him in the store. I'll go check it."
Zeke took his coat and left. 11 p.m. "Clarissa, you're not sleeping yet?" Raven glanced at her on the way to the bathroom. From behind, she could see Clarissa inserting the card reader. Raven thought that she was reading the interview manuscript and watched her as she went to get a drink of water. She found that Clarissa was watching a video, which looked very dark as if it was from many years ago. The video wasn't clear and was rather grainy. It wasn't an interview manuscript. Raven left and didn't look at her again. There were too many things on Clarissa's computer. The last time she borrowed her computer to watch TV, a software dialog box that she hadn't enabled had suddenly popped up halfway, and a dark avatar had asked her if it was convenient to watch a video. Raven had been scared senseless, but later, Clarissa had told her it was a virus, much to her disbelief. After going to the toilet, Raven poured herself a glass of water. While drinking, she asked about tomorrow's progress. "Clarissa, where are we going for the news tomorrow?" "A police officer will come to pick you up tomorrow. Just follow him for the interview." Clarissa turned off the video and came over for breakfast. Raven nodded, feeling like Officer Allen from Austria was really considerate. She took a serious look at Clarissa again and only felt relieved after making sure that she wasn't affected by Louis and Olivia. "How about you?" she asked. "I'm resting tomorrow." Clarissa took a sip of orange juice. She was still thinking about the USB, the one Pete had given her. Other than the evidence about the criminal, there was also another video left by the West family. The incident about the meteor crater had been kept secret by the people above, and the ordinary citizens had no idea about it. Michael had placed 3 orders at 129 previously, which, besides checking Claudius and Bessy, also included checking the crater. But no one at 129 had taken the order. Jared had told Bessy several times. There weren't many people left from that generation. Claudius, Bertha, Mr. White. These people who knew the specific details were all dead. Too many people were involved in Austria as well, like the money laundering criminal Milo, whom she'd been investigating. This was the main reason why Jared took over Milo's order. Clarissa slowly turned off the computer and went to her office to take a black bag. Beside her, Raven watched her and was so stunned that she even forgot to yawn. "Clarissa, are you going out again? Be careful. Austria is too dangerous." Austria was absolutely safe only in the areas managed by Interpol. "Don't worry." Clarissa took the backpack. "Don't wait for me to come back tonight." 10 minutes later, on a street outside the film and television base. At this time, the lights were brightly lit, and there was a crowd. On the street, a woman wearing black cropped jeans and a black tight-fitting t-shirt attracted many people's attention. Her hair was wavy, she had fair skin, and her figure was curvy and glamorous. Her black t-shirt was rolled up, revealing her waistline, and a pair of sunglasses was placed on her high nose. Finally, she stopped outside a bar and reached out to take off her sunglasses. Her beautiful eyes were revealed, showing off her thick and curvy eyelashes and dark, charming eyes. She reached out to apply some red lipstick, then smiled and entered the building. Episode 609. Clarissa, a woman of many talents. Inside the bar, Zeke was discussing business with a foreigner. "Happy to do business with you." After signing the agreement, the foreigner spoke in unskilled English, showing his sincerity. Zeke also got up and extended his right hand, smiling slightly. "Happy to do business with you as well." The foreigner asked him to continue playing, but he had kindly declined. He still had to film tomorrow. "Let's go." He straightened the collar of his white shirt, his figure tall and slender, looking extremely handsome. Under the dim light of the bar, his whole body became more and more out of place with this glitz. His bodyguard Rowan skillfully helped him to block the 23rd woman who came to strike up a conversation with him. The two were about to go out. Suddenly, there was a sudden riot in the back. More than a dozen black-clothed bodyguards took out their weapons and moved among the crowd, and a gunshot could even be heard faintly. It was normal for a few gangsters to appear in Austria. These people spoke in Austria's native language. "Catch her! Don't let her get away!" The exit was already blocked by 4 men in black with weapons. In the rioting crowd, the noise was deafening and screaming also accompanied. Some people even calmly continued to watch the lively dance. Rowan frowned. "Film god, let's go quickly." Nodding, Zeke continued walking towards the exit, quickening his pace. His eyes suddenly stopped when he saw a familiar back figure. Clarissa stuffed the things she had just got into her bra. It wasn't the first time she was at this bar, but she was having a headache at the sight of Milo's men. She didn't have Bessy's combat skills and had no way of escaping. Milo wasn't to be trifled with, and she was afraid that it would affect the studio's filming. This fake name might be useless in the future. She was mixing in the crowd, thinking about countermeasures when her wrist was suddenly grabbed forcefully. There were many messy people around. Clarissa was about to throw the man over her shoulder when she turned her head and saw that it was Zeke. Zeke glanced at her getup, but didn't say a word. He threw his black coat at her and said solemnly, "Follow me out." Clarissa didn't have time to think about why Zeke recognized her. She just glanced at him and hesitated slightly.
Don't worry. He took a step forward calmly. He was Lone Wolf's uncle, after all. Clarissa felt assured that he wouldn't do anything he wasn't sure of. She could just stop using this identity in the future. Wait 30 seconds. Rowan squeezed in front of them. Film God, you... He paused when he saw Zeke clutching the wrist of a gorgeous female enchantress. So, this was the type of girl that Film God liked? Before he finished thinking about it, the gorgeous girl took out a piece of tissue and wiped off the charming lipstick on her lips. Then, she took out a box of powder from her pocket and patted her face. She flipped down the folded-up black t-shirt and then pulled the thin lines so that the t-shirt instantly became loose. Draping Film God's coat loosely on her body, she stared at Rowan with charming eyes. Can I borrow your glasses? Rowan contributed his myopia glasses, dumbfounded. After she put them on, she squinted a few times and waited for her eyes to adjust to the glasses. Her whole person's momentum was changed instantly, changing from a gorgeous dancer to a next-door college student and timidly following behind Film God. Staring at her, Rowan suddenly felt like she was very familiar. The three of them walked to the exit. The men in black stood straight and looked down at Clarissa. Clarissa lowered her head, pretending to be afraid of them, but her hands shrank in her coat and she put on a defensive posture. The man in front had yet to speak when a bearded man came out and frowned. Let them go. Putting one hand in his pocket, Zeke's whole body looked clean and proper. His eyes fell on the person who spoke, and he nodded slightly, gentle and polite. Thank you. After the three people left, the man in black glanced at the bearded man. Boss, why did you let them go? That woman's figure looked like the waitress. Shut up. Milo glanced at him with deep eyes. That man just now is the secret owner of this bar. The man in black dared not to speak any more. Without any strength, no one would dare to open a bar in Austria. This bar had just emerged in the past 2 years, but no power in the surrounding area dared to stray wildly here. The next day, Raven was sent to run the news by Clarissa. While openly catching up on her sleep in the crew, Clarissa observed the reactions of Zeke and Rowan, but to no avail. She yawned. Miss Hale, are you sleepy? Rowan had changed to a new pair of glasses today. This is Film God's wicker chair. If you're sleepy, you can lie down on it for a while. Bessy's friends, no matter how old, were automatically a generation younger to Rowan and Film God. Rowan looked earnestly at her, like her old mother. Looking damned, Clarissa still put down the director's little pony tuck. Miss Hale, do you have any enemies in the crew? Film God was filming, so Rowan sat down beside and chatted with her. Clarissa squinted her eyes. I don't think so. Her enemies were all dead. Oh. Rowan nodded thoughtfully and stopped talking. Clarissa fell asleep. The atmosphere of the shooting scene changed a little. Lewis came in holding his phone, and his eyes rested on Clarissa as he said to the person on the other end. Yes, she's here. Mom, she's asleep. Yes, I know. He was talking to his mother. Lewis put down his phone and glanced at Clarissa. Chairman Fay, Clarissa seems very familiar with Film God. At his side, the secretary watched as Rowan poured tea for Clarissa and couldn't help but whisper. Lewis subconsciously narrowed his eyes. He was also surprised. How did Clarissa know Director Simpson and Zeke? Clarissa didn't sleep for long before Director Simpson woke her up to guide the assistant photographer. Seeing how stressed Director Simpson was, Clarissa quickly woke herself up. Go and rest first. Don't get angry. You're so old already. Just let me handle it. She motioned to the staff to take Director Simpson to the lounge. Yesterday, the bald office worker frowned and lowered his voice. The main photographer will arrive the day after tomorrow. There has been an emergency, and there's no other choice.
Clarissa nodded and silently continued to help with the planning. The assistant photographer from yesterday lowered his head and silently gave Clarissa an obscure look.
Everyone, it's time for a break. Chairman Fay bought food for everyone.
Not far away, a staff member shouted. No one refused Chairman Fay, and most workers stopped. Christy took a piece of fruit and glanced at the assistant photographer and the photography team around him, pretending to be puzzled.
Are you okay? Have you encountered any difficulties at work? You can tell Chairman Fay he's a very good person, right, Senior?
Those who could work in this photography team were all somewhat capable, especially the assistant photographer, who had just graduated from the University of Chicago and had been accepted as an apprentice by a famous teacher. There were rumors in the crew about Clarissa in the photography team. He was ranked among the top 2 professions in the country and naturally looked down on Clarissa's low-profile profession. Upon hearing Christy's words, the assistant photographer also recalled from yesterday that Christy and Olivia were close to Louis, and he had specially come to see her. Thinking of this, the assistant photographer looked at Louis and directly said,
Chairman, if Director Simpson doesn't want me to shoot, you can just tell me. He said I was in the wrong, but let a nobody with a pheasant profession guide me. What does he mean?
Everyone in the crew knew who this nobody referred to. There had been rumors last night. The crew exchanged glances, and a few quietly discussed the relationship between Clarissa and Director Simpson. Oh my goodness, Director Simpson was more than old enough to be Clarissa's father. Louis frowned. He naturally knew that Clarissa had nothing to do with Director Simpson, but now, he didn't know how to speak up about it, because he realized that he knew almost nothing about her. It was a little difficult right now. He glanced at Clarissa, who was talking to someone else on set. At the same time, the person who led Director Simpson to rest also returned. He was the staff member who had sat at the door and waited for Clarissa yesterday. He came over with a piece of watermelon and heard the assistant photographer making such accusations. Silently taking a bite of the watermelon, he glanced at the people gossiping at the side.
You guys, even if you can't see Miss Hale's finished product, didn't you go to Ohio State's University webpage to take a look?
What? Christy was taken aback. Olivia also raised her head for the first time. Someone directly turned to the domestic browser and searched for the school's webpage.
She's actually on the homepage, the top 10 outstanding students of Ohio State University, and she's even her year's liberal arts top scorer. She crushed second place by 30 points. In that year, she continuously rejected invitations from Northwestern University and the University of Chicago and Ohio State University's photography department. She received an offer from the Vienna University in the first year of admission, rejected it, and was invited once again in the second year.
Forget about the University of Chicago and Northwestern University, but she also rejected Vienna University, one of the top 3 universities in the world. What? Episode 610. Powerful Forces at Work. There were only 2 top scorers in the national final exams each year, one for liberal arts and one for science. Competition between schools wasn't the rarest thing, especially for those who took second place by a few points. Vienna University could only be blamed for extending her an olive branch. Why? This was what made most people incredulous. However, since it was on Ohio State University's website, it couldn't be fake.
She was a top scorer in the final exams and went to Ohio State University's photography department? What is she playing at? This is such a pity.
How is it a pity? She's Director Simpson's friend despite the age difference, and she even has given lectures on Director Simpson's behalf. Don't mention it. Look at the website below. The top scorer of the science section was also in this college in the same year. Many performers, staff members, and some foreigners here might not know Ohio State University. However, they had heard of Vienna University. For a while, most of them enthusiastically discussed this matter. The photographer's assistant who just told Louis about Clarissa took back his words in shock. His heart trembled, his complexion flushed red, and he was rendered speechless. He didn't dare to look at Louis. It was just that Louis didn't care about him now and was looking in Clarissa's direction. He didn't know Clarissa's specific situation, but he had often heard Gloria praising her. Some time ago, he had heard from Gloria that Clarissa had once studied abroad. So, she had studied abroad at Vienna University? Louis's heart felt a little strange at the moment. Clarissa had no sense of existence in his heart previously, and be it her personality, appearance, or any other aspect, she hadn't been his type at all. Olivia noted that he was staring at Clarissa, and her expression darkened. She pursed her lips and tightened her grip on the script. After a long while, she raised her head and smiled indifferently. "Chairman Fay, didn't you ask about my mentor last time? He's investigating a missing person case nearby. I'll contact him later." This sentence finally made Louis return to his senses. Olivia had studied criminal law at university. This profession was honorable, and her classmates had all worked on major cases in Austria and were quite famous in the entire Evanston circle. They hadn't let Wesley loose and could only start with his hobbies, hoping that the information he found was correct. Excluding this, Louis himself was very interested in the criminal investigation field. Thus, he and Olivia had a topic in common. Zeke was discussing the next film with director Simpson in his lounge. Clarissa was still lying on the recliner. It was only after this incident that she knew that the crew had been discussing her. Her expression had always been light, as if she was indifferent. Rowan wasn't familiar with Clarissa and had only seen her with a few important people from a distance. Over the past 2 days of interaction, he felt like Clarissa herself was a complete mystery.
"So, Miss Hale, why did you go to Ohio State University?"
Beside him, Rowan held up his cell phone and asked Clarissa curiously. Ohio State's university photography major was new and had low scores since most people entered through the liberal arts major, especially since Clarissa was from Evanston. Clarissa was resting with her eyes closed when she heard this. She opened her eyes and seriously thought about it before asking, "Is there a difference between the 3 schools?" Judging by her expression, she seemed to be quite serious. Rowan was speechless. Such an infuriating answer. Rowan almost choked. Thinking about it, what Miss Hale said was right. 10 years ago, Northwestern University, the University of Chicago, and Ohio State University were really not comparable to Vienna University. Compared to Vienna University, these 3 schools were really not much different. Rowan silently turned around to find Film God. Holding a red pen, Zeke was changing a line in the script with director Simpson when he saw Rowan's expression. He looked up at him and asked,
"What? Did you receive a blow?"
Director Simpson had heard the staff talking and could only sneer. Director Simpson took a sip of tea, calm and relaxed. Rowan coughed awkwardly. He still couldn't understand why besides his niece, another person could frustrate him both physically and mentally.
"The next scene is outdoors,"
Director Simpson continued discussing with Zeke.
"I'm not at ease about the security in Austria. I hope we can finish filming as soon as possible without any mishaps."
Zeke nodded while holding his notebook. He had 2 years more of experience filming in Austria than director Simpson, and naturally knew that his words weren't groundless.
"It hasn't been peaceful here recently. Tell the others to pay more attention."
At the thought of what happened last night, Zeke pondered for a while and warned,
It really has been restless. Wasn't it said that a college student went missing? I wonder if they can find him.
Director Simpson sighed. Austria wasn't managed by any country, and people disappeared inexplicably every day. This time, however, the disappearances of a college student had caused countless waves in the country, which was probably a gamble between the few forces. When gods fight, mortals suffer. Zeke took the script and went out to continue filming the next scene. When he came out, Clarissa had already fallen aside, leaning on the recliner. She was still wearing the floral dress and had covered her face with his notebook. Wearing a long floral skirt with her feet resting on the pedals, her thin ankles were revealed. Although it was late July, the temperature in Austria was lower than in America. There was no air conditioning on the set, only ice cubes and fans. The occasional blast of cold wind felt a little chilly. Zeke motioned for Rowan to cover her up with a blanket and then went back to filming. Rowan carefully covered Clarissa with a blanket, revealed that she wasn't a light sleeper like his niece. He heaved a sigh of relief. After covering her feet with the blanket, he went to the studio to find Zeke.
The relationship between Chairman Fay and Miss Hale is a little weird.
Zeke leaned against the tree beside him and grinned. The next scene was shot directly at 7:30 in the evening. Clarissa was awakened by the ringing of her cell phone. She sat up and felt the blanket covering her body slide down. The blanket was gray, thin, and had a light, minty scent. Holding the blanket, she was still in a daze when the phone rang frantically again. She glanced at it and saw that it was a foreign number. She directly ignored it. Stretching, she got up and went to see the filming scene. The scenery here was built by a famous set designer at a high price. At this moment, the crew members were all standing at the edge, and most of the female staff were blushing slightly. Clarissa raised an eyebrow and approached with her phone. The staff immediately made their way for her. Now that the rumors between her and Director Simpson had been cleared up, and Film God was taking such good care of her, most people's attitude towards her had changed greatly. When Clarissa walked in, the long scene between Zeke and Olivia was already over. Zeke was only wearing a pair of white sweatpants, and his upper body was naked. His figure was the legendary definition of slender when clothed, and muscular when naked. His naked upper body was refined, his collarbone was clear, and his muscular lines were extremely beautiful. Not only that, but even his complexion was also very delicate. At this moment, his black wig and body were mixed with rain. He was sitting cross-legged under the waterfall, which was a completely real scene. On top of his head was a huge sprinkler pouring water with great impact. After the scene was over, he got up and took a towel from Rowan. His movements were soothing and graceful, and because he had performed under the sun for so long, his complexion was slightly reddish. However, the look on his face became increasingly tempting. Olivia wanted to apologize to him, but apart from filming and discussing scenes, Zeke hardly communicated with them. Even while discussing scenes with her, he was so alienated and distant. Zeke was famous for having no scandals in the industry, which wasn't without reason. She watched Zeke leave with pursed lips. Beside her, her manager came over and lowered his voice.
Just keep a tight leash on Chairman Fay. Don't even dream of Film God.
Disregarding the Miller family, just Film God's status in the entertainment circle alone was impossible. With a simple wave of his hand, countless women would pounce forward. In the beginning, even big beauties like Film Empress had been defeated, much less Olivia. Olivia knew this. She remained silent and just removed her makeup. After work, she went back to the hotel and hurried to find Louis. She told him about contacting her mentor in the Criminal Investigation Department of Austria today. My mentor is nearby. He'll come to the hotel later, too. Olivia stood at the elevator entrance and said to Louis, "He'll be here soon. Let's go downstairs and wait for him." When they went downstairs, Olivia's mentor had yet to arrive. Olivia said, "My mentor is investigating the case here."
"The college student's disappearance?"
Louis's secretary glanced at her. Nodding, Olivia thought for a moment and lowered her voice again. "It's more than that. There are huge forces laundering money." Louis and his secretary raised their heads and looked at her in shock. Olivia continued in a low voice. "The forces involved are a little too powerful." She was about to continue when she saw Clarissa slowly walking towards them and immediately stopped talking. The secretary also naturally stopped the discussion. Clarissa didn't know that they were being so vigilant around her, but she didn't care either. Ignoring the three of them, she walked straight through the doors, picked up her non-stop ringing phone, and cursed. After a pause, she said faintly, "I just heard that you opened the business." Episode 611. This matter is an S-class secret. The person on the other end of the room was Clarissa's photography assistant. Standing at the elevator entrance, Clarissa casually stared at the constantly changing elevator floor marked in red, and waited for the elevator to come down.
"When have I not?"
There was another pause. Then the other party consciously changed the topic.
"Then can you bring the recent works out? This photo exhibition is in Evanston and is stationed in the City Hall. For the time being, only 36 top photographers have been selected, and they've specially reserved a booth for you. But the selected work has to be chosen by 18 chief curators."
"Aren't there 2 pictures?" Clarissa went into the elevator when it came down. If Clarissa had been beside them, they wouldn't have held back from squeezing her to death. Clarissa didn't have many works and had entered the photography industry relying on 2 works. She had a unique talent for photography, and her works had a great depth and directly hit the soul. Her 2 works had amazed everyone at the American Photography Exhibition, and she had become famous in one fell swoop.
"Your 2 pictures were auctioned off."
The person on the other end of the phone sounded tired. "Oh, then there's no good work for now." Clarissa also remembered this incident. She had taken her camera to cross the desert to war-torn Japan and had photographed the slums. The 2 pictures she was talking about were of the displaced battlefields after the war. They had been taken when she was working as a war correspondent at the border. Ever since taking those 2 pictures, she hadn't photographed anything seriously again. Speaking of this, she suddenly thought of something and gasped. "Oh, there's one picture recently." The person on the other end was immediately refreshed at the mention of another work.
"What is it?"
"Wait for my confirmation. I'll tell you in 2 days, but don't expect too much." Clarissa walked directly to the door and swiped her card to enter. Most of the photographer's works were carefully composed to allow the photographer to take the actions they needed. Most of them had been selected by the photographers themselves after countless screenings. New famous works were randomly captured. Clarissa had taken pictures of Film God once just 2 days ago, but she wasn't sure if he would let her use them. Not only was he a public figure, but he was also a very expensive public figure. Clarissa felt like it was already good that he didn't ask her to delete the pictures she had secretly taken. It might be a little difficult to get his consent to let her enter it for the exhibition. The person on the other end was very excited to hear that she had new work and hung up after urging her to contact him soon. After Clarissa entered her room, she took a shower and went out to find Film God. The elevator was busy and had just come up from the basement level. It stopped on the first floor, and Clarissa leaned against the wall, waiting absent-mindedly. Upon reaching the first floor, the elevator door opened and a group of people, including Raven and Louis, came out. Clarissa stood straight and met eyes with Raven. I just finished following the news, and the police officer sent me back. Raven explained and immediately rid herself of any connection with Lewis and the others. Upon seeing Clarissa, her spirits were a little low. I followed the news of the college student's disappearance. I heard that she's an only daughter and that she's been missing for more than a month. She only has her father, who sold all of his real estate in order to help this matter. Her grandpa is also waiting for her return and wants to see her before he dies. Clarissa, do you think we can find her? Clarissa paused slightly and smiled. Don't think about it. There are so many pitiful people in the world. You have to get used to it. Then she went into the elevator without locking eyes with anyone. Outside, most of the people who had heard her words frowned. Raven was also stunned and immediately said, "No, Clarissa, just—" Lewis interrupted her and faintly said to Olivia, "Take your brother to the restaurant first." Raven swallowed back her words. In the elevator, separated by the elevator door, Clarissa's smile remained unchanged. She made another call to Jared. "Boss, you should have received the evidence, right? They haven't made a move yet?" For so many years, she had traveled all over the world, knowing that she couldn't change it. Entering 129 was the most impulsive choice in her life. When she first teamed up with Hacker B, she had discovered that a dozen or so college students had disappeared quietly abroad. From then on, she understood the direction she wanted to go in the future. She had always suspected that B was Bessy, and she had even dug out some evidence. However, Bessy chose to lie blindly and refused to admit it. The outside world knew that among 129's 5 veterans, Lone Wolf was too mysterious, and Morningbird was overly sensitive to people's needs. Lone Wolf could reject all orders and had an eccentric temper. Morningbird could reject any payment, and it depended on fate. If Lone Wolf was extremely mysterious in the circle and was standing at the end of floating clouds, tall and aloof, then Morningbird was the folk goddess, the flower of wealth in the world. On the other end of the phone, Jared didn't expect Clarissa to be concerned about the follow-up.
They want to catch them together.
Clarissa nodded. It was as she had expected. There was only so much that she could do. I'll return to America in 2 days. I want to see that crater.
You want to investigate it?
Jared frowned.
This matter is an S-class secret. It's not easy to get in.
Bessy had also investigated it. Clarissa laughed softly. It's not that difficult. Pausing, Jared forgot that Clarissa was indeed a spy with 1,000 faces. As they hung up, Clarissa suddenly felt the urge to drink. Episode 612. A Visit from a Group of Mercenaries. The elevator reached the floor. Clarissa had asked Director Simpson for Film God's room number before and knew that it was on the floor above hers. She found the right room number and politely rang the doorbell. It was Hudson who opened the door. He was very surprised to see her standing at the door.
"Miss Hale, are you here for Film God?"
He turned sideways and let Clarissa in. Zeke's room was a suite and wasn't arranged by the program team. Since he had to handle business, Rowan had booked a separate suite for him, so he wasn't on the same floor as the others. The room Clarissa was staying in had originally been arranged for Zeke. Zeke was leaning against the desk, flipping through a script of The Realm of Gods. He looked up and smiled at Clarissa.
"Come sit. What can I do for you?"
For Bessy's friends, he was naturally warm and approachable, especially friends who had an unusual relationship with Bessy. Clarissa saw 2 cans of cold beer on his desk at a glance. The refrigerator in the hotel restocked alcohol every day, and she had already drunk it in the morning in her own room. She took a second glance and averted her eyes, settling down to talk business. Zeke had always been kind to others, which is why he was so popular in the circle and didn't have any black spots. Upon hearing Clarissa's question, he relaxed his tone and spoke like someone chatting beside the beach in the afternoon.
Photography? Is it your work while in the crew?
Clarissa nodded.
Yes, but you'll have to consult Director Simpson for permission.
When Zeke saw that Clarissa was staring at his refrigerator, he put down the script, bent over and opened the refrigerator door. He took out a bottle of beer and threw it at her. Clarissa caught the beer and glanced at him. She was addicted to alcohol and didn't lack people who advised her to stop drinking. For example, the elderly in the community and Gloria. Hence, she rarely ever drank alcohol while eating at the Fay family's house, and even if she did, it was only a small amount. Wesley previously had conflicts with her about drinking as well. Rowan also understood Clarissa's intentions and smiled.
This is a small matter. You needn't come in person. You could have just called.
There were so many pictures of Zeke on the internet, as well as secretly taken pictures by fans. It was really nothing if Clarissa wanted to use a picture she took as a work for an exhibition, especially since she had a close relationship with Bessy. Of course, Rowan didn't know what exhibition she was going to use the photos for. If he knew, he definitely wouldn't be so calm. He had no idea what kind of storm this incident would stir up across Twitter.
Thanks.
Clarissa smiled and held up her bottle of beer.
Do you have Twitter? I'll send you the link once the photography is on display.
Finally, Rowan added Clarissa on Twitter. After she left, he continuously opened her Twitter. She didn't have many circles of friends, but it was better than Bessy's. She posted 2 times a month, sometimes in pictures, sometimes in text, and they all seemed normal and unlike today's show operation. Riding on Bessy's coattails, Rowan had added a lot of important people. Under Clarissa's circle of friends, there were Marvin, Patrick, Robert, Samuel. All these people had liked her posts. Rowan was even more in awe of Clarissa now. With Zeke's consent, Clarissa got ready to settle the details of the photo and wanted to take time out to read the comic, The Realm of Gods. She took time off to deal with the details before sending it to the assistant. Then, she left a note for Raven and snuck out quietly. Clarissa was nowhere to be seen. When Lewis was shooting an outdoor scene with the crew the next day, he realized that Clarissa was gone. He was a little distracted when he talked to Olivia. With Austria's complicated situation recently, he felt like Gloria would surely come to find him if he didn't look after Clarissa. So, he went to inquire Director Simpson about her. Director Simpson wasn't bothered at all and waved him away. Lewis had also asked Zeke's manager, who was even more unbothered. It wasn't until the 4th day, the last day of filming for The Realm of God's crew, that Clarissa suddenly reappeared. No different from before, she was sitting on Director Simpson's pony, Tuck, watching Zeke's film with interest. Raven also finished running her news and was squatting beside her. There was even an unopened can of beer beside her feet. It was the celebration alcohol that Clarissa had asked Raven to bring, although she wasn't sure what they were celebrating. Standing under the boundless mountain, Lewis watched Clarissa and suddenly remembered something. After agreeing to marry Clarissa, he had never once asked about her because he didn't feel the need to learn more about her. Now that he thought about it, Clarissa had never asked about him before either. He fell into deep thought. Boom! Suddenly, thick smoke rose from the mountain on the left, and sparse gunshot sounds were heard. Most people heard the sounds, and the staff members all immediately stopped what they were doing with pale faces. Zeke put down the sword he was holding. Under the scorching sun, his expression was dead serious as he turned to Director Simpson.
Director Simpson, please evacuate first.
This sentence stabilized the staff members for the time being. The smile on Clarissa's face faded as she frowned. Buzz! The sound of a helicopter overhead approached. The crew looked up in horror. There were 2 helicopters with ropes hanging down from above. A group of iron-blooded men slid down the ropes, filling the place with their murderous aura. Zeke looked at these people and recognized them.
They're mercenaries.
Mercenaries? Those international criminals? Those who killed without blinking? This sentence made the crew panic. They were all ordinary people, and to them, these mercenaries were people in rumors. Although they knew about the chaos in Austria, they had always abided by the law and had not encountered any danger before. At this time, everyone was horrified to hear that mercenaries were coming for them. Their lives weren't even worth a mention in front of them. Louis also recognized the severity of the situation and turned to Olivia.
Contact your mentor.
Yes, Miss Song, with your mentor, we'll be fine. The crew cast their eyes on Olivia. Olivia had already taken out her phone to call her mentor. When she explained the situation, her mentor was extremely solemn on the other end of the phone.
Why did you meet them? They're so vicious that even Matthew can't control them. Don't move and try to cooperate with them as much as possible. Don't anger them. We'll be there right away.
Everyone present heard his warnings. They didn't know who Matthew was, but if Olivia mentioned him, he must be a remarkable person. Most of the people present were trembling slightly. Among the group of panicking people, only Clarissa appeared fairly calm. She tilted her head and glanced at Raven. Her mentor? He's from Austria's criminal investigation team. I heard that he has even worked with Interpol before. He's very powerful. He was the one who sent me back to the hotel last time. Raven shrank her neck at the sight of the murderous mercenaries. Clarissa, Clarissa nodded upon hearing her words and glanced up at the helicopter above. She casually picked up a can of beer beside her. All the mercenaries had slid down. This group of murderous people was indeed not good people. Director Simpson was really talented at choosing a place where the 2 powers agreed to meet and deal with one another. The leader was a mercenary captain with a scar on his face. Calming himself down, Louis stood up and communicated with the people fluently in another language. He mentioned Olivia's mentor and Matthew along the way.
Tie them up and take them away.
The leader glanced at Louis and coldly raised his hand. They aimed their weapons at them, and no one dared to speak. It was too quiet. Almost everyone remembered Olivia's words about not provoking them. At this moment, with a click, the silence on the scene was broken. Several people turned towards the sound stiffly, and even the mercenaries who had heard the sound looked over. Clarissa was sitting on the pony, opening the can of beer with one hand. In front of all these mercenaries, she took a sip of beer. Then she turned sideways to the mercenary, aiming a weapon at Zeke and Hudson. Squeezing the beer can, she smiled like a flower and said, "I'll give you a chance. Get lost." Episode 613. The barbecue guy in Marvin's friend group. Clarissa's voice gradually became cold at the end. The scene was dead quiet. And except for Zeke and Hudson, nobody understood why Clarissa reacted this way. The crew even saw that the expression on the group of mercenaries slowly changed, and the already tense atmosphere instantly intensified. It was as if they could easily explode with even a light touch. The cowardly ones in the crew had already turned pale, especially Director Simpson, who had been extremely cautious because of Austria's turmoil recently. It wasn't his first time in Austria, and he had carefully selected this treasured spot after pondering for a long time. Who knew that they would encounter such a thing? He didn't expect Clarissa to be so impulsive, and he had no time to think about why the calm Clarissa had suddenly acted like this. Under the mercenaries' muzzles, he disregarded the danger and directly walked over to Clarissa.
Clarissa, stop talking. Quickly apologize to them.
While talking, he looked at the bloody mercenaries around him. He panicked. At this moment, let alone the actors, even Director Simpson and Lewis, who appeared calm on the surface, were having many storms and huge waves invade their hearts. They might be well known in America, especially Lewis, who had a firm foothold in Evanston. But in Austria, they were nothing in front of this international mercenary group that they had only heard about in rumors. Clarissa just looked up, took another sip of beer, and said lightly, "There's no need to keep your things. Just keep filming." What was she playing at? Lewis raised his head suddenly.
Clarissa, stop talking.
Olivia turned sideways and glared at Clarissa, her eyes shooting daggers. In the end, she didn't say anything and just gritted her teeth. Suppressing her anger, she said to Lewis, "Who does she think she is? I finally found my mentor for help. You're the one she followed here. You deal with her." After speaking, she turned back to look at the group of fugitives. She spoke apologetically to them. Olivia didn't dare to provoke the fierce man with a scar on his face standing in the middle. She spoke cautiously to the mercenary closest to her, apologizing and clarifying that Clarissa wasn't in their crew. "I'm so sorry. This woman isn't one of us." However, the fierce and vicious man with a bloody scar on his face, who looked like the leader of this group of mercenaries, finally reacted. He was only wearing a casual t-shirt and slacks as his bottom. He stood up and took a step forward. The look on his face was too serious. The weapon in his right hand swaggered. Those with blood on their hands were indeed different from those without. As soon as he stepped forward, even ordinary people could feel the inexplicable evil spirit in him. Several crew members couldn't help but take a step back. As an actress, Olivia's calm expression didn't break. She just turned pale and stepped forward, retreating beside Lewis. Lewis supported her, then stabilized his mind and attempted to say something to the mercenary.
"You."
However, the leader didn't stop in front of him and directly past him. He stopped in front of Clarissa. Clarissa was still sitting down. Everything had happened too quickly. Still muddled, Director Simpson anxiously said,
"Clarissa."
Almost everyone thought that Clarissa had angered this group of mercenaries. Without even standing up, Clarissa just patted Director Simpson's arm. "Go and arrange the props first. We'll continue shooting later." After speaking, she tilted her head and looked at the leader with the same expression. Only when she looked up did Lewis and the others see her expression. "Are you going to make a move?" Clarissa glanced at the leader. It wasn't a day or two since these people gave headaches to Matthew.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were."
As he got closer, the mercenary leader finally recognized Clarissa, and his legs turned a little soft for a moment. He had the honor of meeting Clarissa in Japan when he was trading for Terry. Then, he turned around and motioned for his men to put down their weapons.
"Put them down."
The mercenaries obeyed their leader's words and put their weapons down, puzzled. Clarissa finished the beer in a few mouthfuls, squeezing the beer can, and threw it into the trash can brought by the crew. There was only the strange rattling sound in the silence. This made people's hearts numb. Clarissa glanced at the mercenary leader and tapped her knees with her finger. "You interrupted our filming." The leader exclaimed,
"I didn't."
Clarissa was speechless. The mercenary leader was flexible and could bow and submit. Upon seeing Clarissa's dark expression, his desire to survive made him gather his subordinates and all apologize deeply to the crew.
"I'm sorry."
Director Simpson was so shocked that he almost fell, but Zeke held him up. Standing next to Zeke, originally scared half to death, Hudson finally regained his senses and exclaimed in surprise,
"Hey, I know you. Aren't you Marvin's good brother, the guy who knows how to barbecue? So you're in Austria."
Because of the word niece, Hudson had added all 5 Clark brothers, including Samuel and Robert. These 5 big bosses were legendary figures in Evanston, and Hudson had stalked their friends countless times, especially Marvin's post, which Bessy liked. This was the only post that Bessy had liked. Hudson had looked at it very seriously. Hence, he also remembered it very seriously. Zeke paused and glanced at him.
"Barbecue?"
Hudson explained.
"Film God. He's the friend in Marvin's video. He said that your niece likes to eat barbecue very much, and she had a bad appetite 2 days ago because she's in her last trimester."
Clarissa exclaimed, remembering that Bessy indeed had a barbecue note on her cell phone. She took a better look at the mercenary leader. "Oh, so it's you." Upon hearing this, the mercenary leader became even more frightened, especially the word Miller in Film God's name. Zeke Miller. He apologized deeply once again.
"I'm sorry. Do you want a barbecue?"
The group of younger members behind him also remembered something and quickly bowed. Looking at them, Clarissa couldn't help but wonder deeply about something. What on earth had Lone Wolf, this beast, done to this group of mercenaries? She thought about this and remained silent. Clarissa was different from Bessy and was a person who hid well. She was different from Bessy, who said what she wanted and took revenge if she had grudges. The mercenary leader looked at Clarissa even more urgently. Film God knew some inside information and didn't fear the mercenaries in the least bit. He looked at them and chuckled softly.
"No need for a barbecue."
"Hey, wait." Clarissa turned to Director Simpson. "I remember you lacked some thugs for the group performance. Didn't you say that you couldn't find any good group performers here?" In a daze, Director Simpson's body trembled at the sound of this, and he subconsciously glanced at the terrifying mercenaries.
"Clarissa, there's no need to bother these gentlemen. No, I can."
The mercenary leader looked at Director Simpson with his fiercely scarred face.
"What do we need to do?"
2 hours later, Olivia had already called her mentor halfway through, but he still rushed over in disbelief. Furthermore, Interpol had been looking for evidence of these mercenaries for a long time, and this was a perfect opportunity. Several battalions had been sent over. The siren of the police car sounded not far away. Olivia's mentor was very worried. The group of mercenaries had eccentric tempers, and Olivia's group had more than 100 people in total. If something happened, when he reached the bottom of the mountain, he got out of the car impatiently and sprinted 100 yards to the spot. He took out his walkie-talkie and exclaimed,
"Team 1 will meet at the bottom of the mountain. Teams 2 and 6 join me. The rest of the teams remain vigilant in the air. There are many ordinary citizens here, so don't provoke the mercenaries."
A special international team followed him. Far away from the crew, Olivia's mentor heard the lively noise. Feeling puzzled but worried about the crew's safety, he hurried to catch up. When he rushed to the rescue after bypassing a mountain peak, he saw the crew happily interacting. They didn't look like they'd been kidnapped by mercenaries. The group of police officers followed him and looked around.
"Where are the mercenaries?"
Before Olivia's mentor could speak, he saw a man shouting with a loudspeaker not far away.
"You, yes you, Ferdinand, lean over here a little bit. Do you think you're a zombie? Can you give me a little bit of expression?" "Director, is this okay?"
Ferdinand asked cautiously.
"A little emotion, yes, a little more sinister. Yeah, that's passable."
Olivia's mentor was speechless, and the people who followed him also gasped.
He's the top 20 wanted man has the same name as him."
While talking, Ferdinand raised his head and revealed his scarred face. Olivia's mentor said blankly, "What a coincidence. He even looks the same." Episode 614, Top Secret Identity. The movements at their side were so big that quite a few people in the crew were already looking over. Standing quietly at the side, Louis and Olivia had already seen them. "Sir." Taken aback, they quickly walked over. Olivia's mentor, Ernest, raised his hand and pressed the walkie-talkie.
"The situation has changed. Everyone on standby."
He looked up at the scene again. Dressed in armor, Ferdinand was still conscientiously acting as the villain on the battlefield. Under the blue sky, Ernest almost felt like he was dreaming. Or had he reported wrongly to his superiors today? "Sir," Olivia called with a rather natural expression and said apologetically, "You made a wasted trip because of me. This mercenary probably isn't the person you were talking about. They used to sell barbecue." Louis also said apologetically,
"When you're done, I'll treat you to dinner once we're back."
These two didn't mix with Austria, and even if they did, not everyone could recognize these fugitives. Coupled that this group of mercenaries had apologized to the director's group, Louis and Olivia naturally didn't think they were dangerous at all, especially since they knew Clarissa. Director Simpson had asked her about the confrontation too. Clarissa said she intended to do an exclusive interview with this group of mercenaries. The people in the crew subconsciously thought that they had changed their careers halfway through, especially since their attitudes were so good. Gradually, their awe faded, but other than those more courageous people like Zeke and Director Simpson, no one else dared to speak to them. After all, their murderous spirit was indeed heavy. Upon hearing this, Ernest interrupted Louis and looked up stiffly.
"Wait, Olivia. Who did you say barbecued?"
Olivia and Louis subconsciously felt like something was wrong upon hearing his strange tone. Louis's eyes flashed.
"You mean?" "It's him, the man who's being trained by the director. He's Ferdinand, the 20th most wanted criminal, the person even Great God Matthew couldn't find his weakness."
Olivia's mentor stared at Ferdinand and then turned around thoughtfully. He glanced at Olivia and Louis and wiped his face.
"Who told you they opened a barbecue restaurant?"
Olivia's mentor was well known in the criminal investigation circle. He was already impressive enough, but he had even more authority in Matthew's big building. Those who could enter Matthew's building were excellent in all aspects. The wanted list included a list of dangerous people listed in Matthew's building. Ernest had already thoroughly studied the wanted list, especially the group of people in the center of Austria. The mercenary group and the Hacker Alliance had been their key observation targets. However, there was almost no information and no photos about the Hacker Alliance on the list of wanted people. There was almost complete information about the 20 wanted people, including Ferdinand, who had been committing international crimes for many years. Matthew had the most complete information about him. After all, they were the most famous big bosses in the world. Almost everyone in Matthew's building imprinted their information in their hearts. Even if the person who looked exactly like Ferdinand was fake, was his first confidant, the grim-faced killer standing beside him, dancing around, also fake? Ernest's mouth was hanging open. Louis and the others all clearly heard him gasp. His secretary also took a deep breath. Especially Louis, who was too shocked to believe it. However, with Ernest's expression and the heavily armed soldiers behind him, it definitely wasn't fake. Then, how did Clarissa know these people? Louis subconsciously turned to look at her. Clarissa wasn't drinking anymore, but was still sitting down. She held her cell phone and seriously watched the group of people acting. Looking at her, Louis felt like her face was still familiar, but she seemed so strange and distant now. "Chairman Fay, Olivia called Louis and pursed her lips quietly when it seemed like he hadn't heard her.
Take them all back for interrogation first. Don't hurt the ordinary citizens. Let them evacuate first.
Ernest didn't know their complicated moods and looked on solemnly. He raised his hand and waved to the special forces behind him. This opportunity was way too rare. Chances to capture Ferdinand and the others were hard to come by. The fact that Ferdinand had already seen them but didn't leave made Ernest feel doubtful. However, he didn't have time to think too much about it, so he greeted Olivia directly.
Olivia, evacuate the people first and tell Director Simpson that Ferdinand is a dangerous person, second only to the mafia.
Director Simpson and the group were still filming the scene. It was a big scene today. The group that Clarissa helped him find was just right, and there was not much need to perform, since the bloody murderous spirit on their bodies was heavy enough. This scene was Zeke's confrontation with the foreigners. The special effects and scenes needed were extremely grand, and there were also large-scale explosions involved. This was the reason why they had chosen Austria. He was holding his megaphone and was about to say something. At that moment, Special Force soldiers with heavy weapons surrounded the front. What was going on? Director Simpson and his party stopped. Olivia and Louis also walked over and lowered their voices.
Director Simpson, these people are from Interpol. They've come to capture them. Let's leave first and not disturb them. These people are really terrifying murderers. My mentor worked with Matthew and knows them.
At the same time, Ernest approached with an icy cold expression.
Ferdinand, come with us.
Director Simpson stopped filming. Ferdinand's confidant had makeup and was even wearing a wig. Upon seeing Olivia's men, he directly asked,
Boss, shall we take them on?
As long as Matthew wasn't here in person, they weren't afraid at all. Ferdinand was indifferent.
No, someone will take care of them.
Who? The confidant was stunned. He just finished speaking. Squatting beside Clarissa to watch Zeke's acting, Raven also saw Ernest. These days, she had been following him on the news progress, and she stood up to happily greet him. When Ernest saw that Ferdinand and the others weren't resisting, the suspicions in his heart became even more serious. He heard a familiar voice. He turned around and tilted his head. At a glance, he saw Raven standing up and was stunned immediately. He greeted her solemnly and politely.
Miss Allen, why are you here?
I'm waiting for Clarissa to go back with me. Raven subconsciously looked over at Clarissa. Ernest naturally followed her gaze. Still sitting, Clarissa noticed Olivia's mentor looking over and also casually raised her head. Her whole exposed face wasn't something to be ignored. Ernest almost staggered at the sight of her face, and his legs became soft.
You...
Clarissa glanced lightly at him. There's still a group behind the mountain. Stay still, Ferdinand.
You...
The person beside Ernest glanced at Clarissa and was about to chastise her when Ernest stopped him.
Please excuse me.
Ernest bowed to Clarissa from a long distance away and then pressed the walkie-talkie again.
Everyone retreat and return to the back mountain. Keep your volume down.
They had come in a hurry and retreated even more cleanly. Within 2 minutes, everyone had evacuated. Everyone in the crew was silent again, looking in Clarissa's direction, their hearts full of doubts. Interpol was here. What about the barbecue men? Clarissa calmly said, Director Simpson, go ahead and shoot. It's getting dark. Ferdinand wasn't in the least bit surprised. He thought that it was a good thing that Clarissa was in a good temper today. If it had been Miss Miller, none of them would have been able to escape from causing trouble and would have had to lie in bed for at least 3 days. He continued filming with Director Simpson, who no longer dared to scold him as fiercely as before. It wasn't until 6 o'clock in the evening that this magnificent scene was finally wrapped up. Ferdinand and his group went to change clothes. They wiped off the heavy makeup on their faces and changed back into their own clothes before coming to find Clarissa. However, she had already left quickly after watching Film God. Ferdinand apologized to Film God before leaving. After he left, the inexplicable pressure on the entire crew's shoulders was finally relieved. In the next few days, Clarissa was there every day and quietly left once Zeke finished filming. She left almost no trace of her visit. She always had a way of making people disregard her. Zeke came back only once after removing his makeup and saw a tulip still with dew on his chair. Louis never found the opportunity to ask Clarissa. He was unable to talk to her until he was about to return to America. Although he didn't obtain any news from Olivia, he realized that the information about Clarissa in his drawer was probably incomplete. The night before returning to America, he invited Ernest to dinner. At the dining table, he asked Ernest about this.
"You still don't know too much."
Ernest glanced at them and put down his fork. He finally set his eyes on Louis. Louis didn't back off.
"Why?"
Ernest remembered the message from headquarters. Clarissa's identity was top secret. Perhaps he saw the obsession in Louis's eyes, for he shook his head and spoke again, very seriously this time.
"The gap between you and her circle is too big. It makes no sense to probe further."
Episode 615. What scares you, Clarissa? Louis stared at Ernest and tried his best to abandon the bit of strangeness in his heart. He remained silent. His eyes drooped, and a trace of confusion flashed across them. "It's because of Film God, right?" Olivia held her fork with one hand. Her other hand dangled at her side. Her fingernails were pinched tightly into her palm on this other hand. However, she had always been good at acting, so she talked to her mentor with a normal expression. Upon hearing this, her mentor stopped discussing this topic. Instead, he glanced at her and asked,
"Are you still studying? Last time I heard you wanted to take the 129 trainee test. Are you prepared for it? I have insider information, and it's rumored that it might be Morningbird who set the questions this year. She's the most sensitive to people's needs among the 5 veterans, so the questions probably won't be too difficult."
After the Evanston incident, every family had lost people. Unsurprisingly, unloyal people had been ferreted out of 129 as well. Sherry was one of them. Now that there were several vacancies left open in 129, this year's test would definitely be easier than in previous years. Olivia's heart shook when she heard this news. She had taken part in the recruitment test of 129 twice before, and once had been with Sherry, but it had been too difficult to enter 129. She had taken the exam from the age of 23 to 27. Even after 4 years, she still hadn't been admitted. If she could pass the exam, she would be like a caterpillar transformed into a butterfly. This was an extremely strong hotspot for herself and the entertainment circle. Glancing at Louis, she clenched her fists, her eyes drooping and thoughtful. The next day, Louis returned to America.
"Chairman Fay, this is the package collected by the front desk after you left."
As soon as he entered the company, Louis received a package. He went into his office and opened it. The moment he saw what was inside, he was stunned. Inside was a green book containing his divorce certificate with Clarissa. Louis stared at it for a long time before putting it into the pocket of his coat. In the evening, he had gone back to see his mother and had asked about her condition. Under Michael's systematic treatment, Gloria's illness hadn't acted up while Louis was away. At the dining table, Gloria praised Clarissa as usual.
It's all thanks to Clarissa. This girl even sent me a bunch of things yesterday. Charles took out a bowl of soup from the kitchen with a smile. Clarissa is always careful. She knew that Miss Fay likes Mr. Barnes' paintings and didn't forget to bring them back when on a business trip in Austria.
The two sang the same tune. Louis sat down next to Gloria. He knew from Charles that Gloria was in much better health now. Although he wanted to confess to Gloria about his divorce tonight, he really didn't dare to at this moment. He just ate silently, full of thoughts. After eating, he went upstairs to bathe. Charles waited until he finished showering before knocking on the bathroom door. Then he came back with the black jacket that Louis had put in the hall.
Sir, your clothes.
Having said this, Charles pursed his lips. After a while, he said solemnly,
Also, something fell off your coat.
It was the divorce certificate. Louis paused for a moment and lowered his head.
You know. Sir, why are you doing this?
Charles was in disbelief and had to force himself to calm down.
Is there still room for change in this matter? I'll go to see Mrs. Fay. No.
Louis directly took his arm to prevent him from going to see Gloria. He said directly,
This is a conclusion we've settled on. Even my mother can't change it. I don't like Clarissa at all.
He ignored the strange feeling in his heart.
Charles, go to bed early.
He closed the door. Charles stood there for a long time before sighing deeply. Turning around, he was about to go downstairs when he saw Gloria standing not far away.
Gloria, you heard everything.
Charles's expression changed. Gloria took a deep breath.
Don't worry about him. Clarissa deserves better.
She was wrong. She shouldn't have forced Louis to like Clarissa.
Gather a list of unmarried young people in Evanston tomorrow.
Gloria glanced at Charles.
I want them to be good characters in all aspects. I'll personally choose.
From today onward, she wouldn't force Louis anymore. Unaware of what was happening in the Fay family, Clarissa still punctually came to the scene in Austria every day, until August 3rd, when Zeke finished filming a scene and the assistant brought a drink over. He turned around and asked the manager to send one to Clarissa. However, Clarissa wasn't on Director Simpson's pony. Hudson also glanced over. Last time, when he chatted with Clarissa, she had said she was Film God's fan. The crew had already become accustomed to seeing Clarissa watch the filming scene without moving for the past half a month, but they didn't expect to not see her come at all today. They were suddenly unaccustomed to her absence.
Miss Hale should have returned home,
the manager said. Zeke nodded slightly. In the evening, they returned to the hotel. Zeke received a call from Bessy.
Bessy?
Zeke frowned upon picking up, and his eyebrows couldn't help but become more gentle.
Why did you call me?
Bessy was greeted by countless people every day in this special period. Fortunately, they all knew that she wasn't patient, so they either called Marvin or Michael to ask about her. Michael had also specifically requested this. Last night, Zeke had just asked Michael about her. Now that Bessy was looking for him, he expected something must have happened.
Are you free now?
On the other end, Bessy was downstairs in the hospital. It was still afternoon in Evanston, and she lowered her voice as people walked past her.
Zeke walked with his mobile phone, opened his closet door and took out his pajamas.
I've just ended work. There weren't many scenes today.
Can you go to the World Health Organization to get some medicine now?
Bessy massaged her temples. Zeke paused slightly.
Go on.
Clarissa was injured. Bessy sat down at the edge of the flower bed, glancing at the crowd of people downstairs. Her fierce expression covered her eyebrows, but her voice sounded as usual.
She didn't go to the hospital, and Christopher isn't in Austria either. I've already told the people in the organization to prepare the medicine. I don't trust anyone else to go.
After hanging up, Bessy held her phone and dialed Jared's number instead of going back in. Jared picked up quickly. "Jared," Bessy asked bluntly without even waiting for his answer. "What the hell is Clarissa investigating?" Jared was about to recite the speech he had prepared when Bessy said slowly, "You better think over it carefully before answering." In Austria, Zeke drove to the World Health Organization and took a medical kit. The person in charge of delivering the medicine also told him in detail how to use it. Zeke had a good memory and remembered it after hearing it once. Based on how serious Bessy had been, Zeke knew that Clarissa was probably on a secret mission, so he didn't ask further and didn't tell his manager either. Clarissa hadn't returned to America and was still staying in the hotel. Today, she was wearing a long white t-shirt and a pair of loose pants. Through the thin t-shirt, her abdomen cluttered with bandages and bloodstains could vaguely be seen. Indifferent, she held a beer in one hand, carried her laptop to the table, and started watching TV. She was watching the variety show 24-Hour Idol. Her cell phone suddenly rang and she looked at it to see a blocked number from America. Clarissa looked away. The phone stopped for about 2 minutes and then rang again. Clarissa slammed the beer onto the table and picked it up calmly. "Dad."
"Where are you now?"
The voice on the other end was very cold and laced with anger. "I'm on a business trip. I can't go back," Clarissa said lightly.
"Did you divorce Louis?"
The person on the other end was very solemn. Clarissa smiled. "Since you already know everything, I don't have an answer to that." Her dad panted roughly.
"Clarissa, are you trying to piss me off?"
"I won't dare to."
"Won't dare? No, Clarissa. What could scare you?"
He sneered.
"You studied for a year, then went to Ohio State University. I told you to follow your sister and take the civil service exam, but you refused and finally went to work at the newspaper agency. Now that you've been kicked out of the Fay family, where's the Hale family supposed to show our faces? Whether your sister is studying or working, everyone is envious of me. But when it comes to you, why is everyone secretly pointing me out and shaming you?